Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Resilience Show. Really special episode today. I'm sitting here with Tom Spooner, who's the co-founder and president of Warriors Heart. He's a retired Master Sergeant from the United States Army with 21 years of service, serving at several units to include the unit, which is 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, or otherwise known as Delta Force, where he served for 10 years. Amazing background. Before we get started, as always, I want to read Tom's bio because it's noteworthy to say the least. Tom Spooner's service to our nation in the United States Army spanned 21 years. His career includes 5 years in the 82nd Airborne as a Green Beret in the Army's 7th Special Forces Group for 6 years, and ultimately the U.S. Army's 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta for 10 years. His military career includes 40 months of direct action combat and 12 deployments, some to Afghanistan, 1 to Afghanistan, and 11 to Iraq. After retiring from the Army in 2011, Tom approached his struggles with self-medication, post-traumatic stress disorder, and traumatic brain injuries with the same tenacity and commitment to excellence that he did during his military career. He began speaking candidly about the repercussions of his experiences and the realities of the difficulties he had coping with them. Determined to help his community cope with suicide and addiction, alcoholism, and the rest of their experience in war, Tom has rededicated his professional efforts to healing warriors the warrior's way. With a voice nearly unmatched in credibility and experience, Tom has successfully enabled thousands of veterans, active duty service members, first responders, and law enforcement personnel to embrace their struggles, seek treatment, and understand that they are not alone. Warriors Heart has treated and trained almost 3,000 warriors in 8 years. There are 2 Warriors Heart facilities, one in Bandera, Texas, and one in Milford, Virginia. Tom has been sober for 32 years, is a Christian for 30 years, has been married for 34 years to the love of his life, and is a proud father of 2 young men who are both currently serving in the United States Army. Tom, incredible resume. I've been impressed by you for a long time, and we've talked before, but it's an honor to get to meet you in person, shake your hand.
Same here, Chad. Honor to meet you also. I heard you on Sean Ryan. I heard all that stuff, so it's kind of like we know each other, but we don't. So it's really cool to meet you in person.
We both did the multiple hours of deep dive in Sean's exactly. Marathon episodes.
In his therapy chair.
Yeah, his therapy. I did tell him that at the end. I was like, man, this didn't feel like an interview. It felt like a therapy session. Yeah. And but he actually he talks about that. He said Sean said he's been through a lot of therapy. He's open about it, a lot of therapy himself, and he's taken a lot of his interview style from his therapist.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're patients. I said a lot more than I thought I was gonna say.
Right.
I probably should more than I probably should have on some things, but he has a good way of pulling that out. I won't do that to you today, by the way. But yeah, man. So I think there's a lot of parallels in our backgrounds. Yeah. We had some different timing in our own personal recoveries of how that took place, but more so than military experience is what we're doing now. You know, Mighty Oaks Foundation and Warriors Heart, and I know we've already collaborated on Mighty Oaks being able to partner with Warriors Heart for so many of the veterans that we deal with at Mighty Oaks that are dealing with suicide ideations and depression and anxiety and just making poor choices. Or dealing with addiction, and that's not what we do at Mighty Oaks. Yep. And I love the fact that we don't have to do it all, right? There's other people doing other great things. We collaborate, come together, and just meet the same common mission. So
yeah, and that's what I love being able to do too, is because each of our spaces is very defined. Like I run the Island of Broken Toys. You know, whenever I'm like the last house on the block. You know, nobody wants to go to rehab. You know, that was never on anybody's short-term or long-term goals. You know, so. They always end up with me at the last part, but it's very definitive. Like ideally, if folks can make it at other places, you know what I mean? Because there's so many good programs that are out there, especially Mighty Oaks and everything like that is, but whenever you can't make it in those places, that's when I get them, you know, and then they get trained up, cleaned up, you know, and then back into the fight and then can enjoy all the other stuff from the TBI stuff that's out there. I mean, everything that's out there, they can enjoy it.
Yeah. And you get them for quite some time, right? Like.
Yeah, for 42 days. It's a minimum 42 days inpatient treatment. Yeah, primary diagnosis is chemical dependencies with secondaries of PTSD, moral grief and injury, all the rest of the unprocessed trauma.
What do you, I mean, I know how it's been going 8 years now.
Yeah.
As organizations start and your roles change, right? We talked about it earlier. The beginning of Mighty Oaks and the beginning of Warriors Heart's a lot different than what we see the organizations today. What is your role there on a daily basis?
Yeah, on a daily basis is the shortest version is I provide warrior oversight. And that goes back into a longer conversation of, well, we can have it now, I guess, is, you know, one thing that I noticed, like we were talking about earlier, is like I was sober for a long time, you know what I mean? You know, and had a lot of tools in the tool belt. And I was able to learn stuff from World War II vets, from Vietnam vets, from Korea vets, you know what I mean, that had already been through and processed and were going through different things. But what kept coming up for me is whenever, like, warriors, like, we're problem solvers, you know, whether you're a firefighter, the house is on fire, come put it out, like, you know, solve that problem.
Right.
Law enforcement, obviously military, 9/11 happens, hey, you know what I mean, solve our problems, you know, so we're problem solvers. That's part of a warrior's culture and what we do. We solve problems. However, when it came to our own problems, we said, chaplain, save us. Psych, save us. You know what I mean? We didn't have an ownership of our own space and our own problems. Now we need chaplains and we need subject matter experts. I always just go back to the talk, you know, where, hey, you got a commander warrior that's in there and he's listening to his S4, his S2, his S1, you know, and at the end of the day, they're all making recommendations, but then he makes the decision on what they have to do. You know, so a big thing about it is us taking ownership of our own problems, you know, and not passing them off to other folks, because our mission statement at Warriors Heart is warriors healing warriors, not a slogan.
Right.
You know what I mean? We, like at Warriors Heart, like we have our licensed clinicians, you know what I mean? We have our doctors, we have our NPs, everything that's out there, but the real healing takes place around the fire at night.
The peer-to-peer level.
Yeah. I mean, there's no pressure like peer pressure, right?
Right.
And if we got screwed up together, it just makes sense that we're going to heal together.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a really big thing. Back to your original question, what do I do out there? Is number one, I provide warrior oversight because I am the population. You are the population. You know, I mean, we know, because the subject matter experts, like my psychologists and, you know, and my counselors, they want to do more counseling, right? Because they're like, this fixes everything, you know, and then, but we know, hey man, we can only take that for so long, you know? So I provide the gauges and the handrails for how much we're doing of what we're doing out there. And nothing that we do at Warriors Heart, everything that we do at Warriors Heart, I went through myself. So there's no theoretical new age stuff going on out there. There's like, hey, what are the fundamentals? What are the basics? So whenever they leave here, they're sober, confident warriors and have a shot at it, you know?
You know, as we end the episode today, I want to circle back to getting into Warriors Heart and how people get involved and what they do, kind of nuts and bolts of it. But I want to ask you that because you said something really that I really appreciate in a difference that you and I have. A lot of people have kind of fit more into my mold as they went through their military service, and then the wheels flew off, and then they got well, and they had this that kind of trajectory of their recovery path, where you were opposite. You found hope, healing, a relationship with God. Like you became sober before you joined the military. So you joined the military or maybe early in the military, right? Like, yeah. So you joined the military in 1990. Yep. 20 years old, I think.
Yep.
Right. And
I was 20.
And so shortly after you found the restoration for all those things. And so when you had all your experiences in combat and things like that, you were already sober, making good choices. You had a strong spiritual foundation. Yep. And for the show and the sake of what we do here, you were living a resilient life.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how'd that begin? Like, I guess I'll take a step back even further. Like, what made you join the military?
Yeah. So back to the beginning, right? The beginning of the story is what made me join the military is, you know, I grew up in a really small town named Belglade, Florida. It's right next to South Bay and Clewiston and Chosen. No one ever heard any of those places, you know, and it's the middle of nowhere, just in the middle of sugarcane fields and sod farms. And,
I know what sugarcane fields. I'm Louisiana.
Yeah. So very similar to that. Swamps, the whole thing. And so I grew up there. My dad was an alcoholic. growing up. His dad was an alcoholic growing up. It was family tradition kind of thing. And so my dad eventually got sober, and, we have a great relationship. But I grew up pretty hard, just in that strong men around me. My grandfather was a World War II vet. My other grandfather was in law enforcement for like 40 years. That's the only reason why he didn't, go to the war, because they needed some cops around. So he got chosen for that. And so those were my grandfathers, whenever I was growing up. So heavily influenced by my grandfather was in World War II. And then I had an uncle of mine that was a 3-tour Vietnam vet. So my whole life, all I've ever wanted to do was join the military. That was it. I was 10 years old running around with, death from above, paratrooper shirts on, and stuff. And yeah, man, I just always wanted to join. I was a tough kid, played football. In South Florida, football's religion, so
Yeah.
I wasn't that great at it. Obviously, I joined the military. I didn't go into pros, but I loved it. And I've always worked hard, growing up with the men that was around me, like, you work, boy,
Yeah.
and so I was always a hard worker and all that piece, but I always struggled with alcohol, even at a young age, started drinking when I was 10 years old, kind of deal. But those were my influences, you know what I mean? Those were my influences, as far as joining the military. And my grandfather and my uncle, they were, they were enlisted. They were enlisted guys, and so they knew I wanted to join the military, and they're like, well, you're going to be an officer, and I'm like, well, I don't want to be an officer. I wanted to get out of high school and go right into the military. That's all I ever wanted to do was be a ranger in Ranger Regiment. That was it. And they said, well, okay, well, you're going to be an officer. And how I was raised, when men like that tell you to do something, you just say, yes, sir.
Right.
And so my grandfather passed my senior year of high school, which was pretty devastating to me. It just made my anger towards God and my alcoholism and my violence, everything just kept escalating at that point. So I attempted to go to college. I went to, I participated in Florida State's ROTC program. I actually went to jump school as a cadet,
Really?
and yeah.
Yeah.
But then, then I just kept getting into more trouble and trouble with the law at that point. And I was like, man, I just got to enlist, and so whenever I enlisted, that was in the summer of 1990, right before Iraq invaded Kuwait.
Okay.
So that was how I began my military career.
Did an infantry contract?
Yeah, so that was funny because, like I said, all I ever wanted to be was a ranger,
yeah.
right? And I fancied I knew. I was pretty arrogant, cocky, full of myself, badass, you
Yeah.
know. So I thought, and been to jump school, and so I went to the recruiter, and I got a 2-year contract as 11 X-ray, and I was going to be 11 Bravo infantry, and then I was going to go to RIP and then in the Ranger Regiment, but my recruiter got me with a 11 X-ray, so I was unassigned infantry. So in basic and AIT, I got assigned as an 11 hotel. I'm like, what the heck is 11 hotel? And it's a tow gunner.
I keep getting all the tow gun. I'm originally a tow gunner too.
I don't.
In the Marine Corps 0352, and we've had several guests on the show that like we're all tow gunners.
I know. So that's where they got me, and I was like, well, I can still go to RIP, and they're like, nope, they don't have heavy, anti-armor stuff in there anymore. So okay, I'm not going to Ranger Regiment, right from the get-go. So I went to the 82nd, and but before I went up to the 82nd, I was living my little movie dream. I saw my life like as this movie going along, and man, and I love the military. As soon as I joined, you want to talk about welcome home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, man, I finally found where I fit.
You were like, this
life.
is the right place for me.
Oh my gosh, man. I finally, like, for the first time in my life, because I was always that kid that didn't fit in. You know what I mean? I just never felt a part of or any of that kind of stuff for many different reasons, but that was just the truth. And then even at basic training, man, it was like, my people. And they loved angry, violent young men,
Sure.
you know what I mean? So, and I was good at it, and I was a good athlete, lifted a lot of weights and, like I said, super tough, a lot of fighting. So I was really good at the military. And then, that was when the Gulf War kicked off. And then before you go to war, you got to get married,
Of course, yeah.
of course, right? So because
You
you're going to go to war,
BAH
get
and
killed, you know what I mean?
pay.
You're a hero. Everybody's crying at home. And so we got married. And then within the next month and a half, I was deployed to Saudi Arabia in like December of 90, and then, Gulf War in 91. So that was like my entrance into it, which, none of the war that I personally experienced in the Gulf even came close to what happened post 9/11 in my experience. However, me, coming from the street and into a war zone, it was significant.
It's significant, right? Yeah.
Oh my God. And it, there's a couple of things too. Cause it was, cause I already hated God a whole lot. I always knew God existed. I was raised, in the church and everything. And that's not a hit on the church. It's just where I was at. I could never connect, and I was very angry, towards God. Always knew that he existed, but, really pissed off. And then whenever I went to war and seeing what I seen there, I'm like, yeah, there's a God, and it's the devil, because man, innocence getting destroyed, all the ugly part of war. And so then when I got back, my drinking just increased more and more, levels of violence more and more. But here's the funny thing was I was super high functioning alcoholic. I was like a golden boy, early 90s to be in the 82nd and as an E4 have a Ranger tab, you know what I mean? So I was within the first 2 years, I got promoted to sergeant, had been to Ranger school. I got my EIB, got my CIB, you know what I mean? I was like this rock star professionally, but personally I was a train wreck. You know what I mean? My marriage was coming apart because of me, 100% because of me and my drinking and everything. And because there's only two loves that I have in my life, and one is my wife, and the other one is the Army, as far as at those times, and so it was like professionally I was good, and then personally wreck, I'm one of those guys, if I drink alcohol, like you would say, like, yeah, man, you should never drink again. You know what I'm saying? I'm that guy.
Right.
You know what I mean? That when alcohol enters my system, I'm the dude that's doing all the horrible stuff that like, oh my God, man, what do you, but without a drink, I was a pretty decent human. You know what I'm saying? I was a little mean, a little rough around the edges, but
to make you,
but I treated
alcohol,
people right.
Angry, violent.
Oh yeah, man, I would become everything that I hated, but that's what makes me an alcoholic and not just a hard drinker. Cause some people, cause I'm not the I'm not the alcohol police, you know what I mean? By any means, it's a huge part of our culture. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Some people could have a glass of wine and be totally fine.
Exactly. But if it's hijacked in your life or hijacking your career, like, yeah, I have a problem with it and you should too, and, but the thing I would change whenever I drank, I would do things that I would never do sober, and that's what makes me an alcoholic. Some people just get drunk and they get happy and they do stupid things but not me. I would be that guy, and so ended up costing my marriage with my wife. And that really got my attention as far as like getting sober. Because it was a mind melter for me. Because how could I be doing so good in the military? I mean, like, like top percent,
Sure.
And then my life completely coming apart. It didn't, if I had DUIs and if I was, getting locked up, like that made sense. But like I was unscathed.
Yeah.
I should have been in all those places. You know what I mean? I just got away with it.
Got
Was
lucky.
only a difference between me and other folks was I didn't get caught, But it ended up catching up with me, and then it cost me my marriage at that time, but then that's when I decided, like, man, I need to do something about it, and because my wife and I had already split, and then I knew it was just a matter of time for me getting in trouble in the Army, because I was not doing good things, and I had always like built myself up high enough so whenever I'd screw things up, I just kind of dropped down to normal status, and I would get away with a lot of stuff because, man,
Sweep things
Spooner's
under
a
the
hard
rug.
worker. Look at him, you know what I mean? He's doing it. I make some mistakes, and they'd be like, don't do that again, but so anyway, I didn't get sober on my own though. For me, there's a lot of folks that can do it. I went to AA, and that's how I got sober.
So you said you separated from your wife.
Uh-huh.
Did you get, would the reconciliation happen?
It did. Lucky for us in North Carolina at the time, you had to be legally separated for a year before you could get a divorce. Okay. And so we were legally separated, and appropriately, smart woman. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like that was all on me. And so I was in the barracks. She was at our little apartment. I mean, it was brand new E5. You don't have no money, you know what I mean, or anything. Exactly. And she was living her own life appropriately, but we were like no kidding separated, man. And at the time, with no reconciliation in sight, I started going to AA just as a tool to kind of manipulate her of like, hey, I'm going to AA. She's like, hey, don't care, because I had just hurt her so much, that she, appropriately, she was done with it. And so about the first year that I was sober, I mean, we were separated almost a year, but during that time, I just focused on my job in the military, me still being a good NCO in the 82nd, in E5, and working really hard, and then really hard work in AA, which led to my spiritual life, which eventually led to my Christianity. So yeah, but the reconciliation ended up happening, after that first year of sobriety, we got better. It was kind of funny because it was all a God thing, right? My deal was not to manipulate, not to lie, cheat, steal, manipulate, the old hustle, all that crap I used to do before. I'd got God in my life, had a group of men around me that held me accountable and responsible, and I was helping other men through the process. So like everything that you talk about now and that I talk about now is what I initiated, in 92, and then we got back together. I finally came up for on-post housing on Fort Bragg, and it was E5,
By the way, I love that we call it Fort Bragg again.
Yeah, oh, I know, man. That was the worst whenever it went away for a little while, but Liberty wasn't that bad. But I mean, how can it not be Fort Bragg?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am glad also. But we moved on post, and then I was always from the country. My wife's from the city. I was always from the country, and and on post housing, man, at Bragg was, especially for lower enlisted, it was the projects, and military projects is what it was. And we stayed there. I could handle that for about 4 months. People on top of people, and I was like, we got to get out of here. And but that's when we got. It was a gift, that's what kind of a new start for us was at a new place. It was kind of a new start, and then we moved off post, about 30 minutes off post in Hope Mills. And and that's how we got back together. And that was my initial, piece of getting on track, and from that moment to this moment, I've been getting after it the same way I always have, man. Like I'm an extremist, right? I know you can't relate to that, right?
All in or all out, right?
Yeah, that's it. I don't do anything half-assed for long. Yeah. So I'm either all in or I'm out.
I'm kind of the same way. So you end up going from the 82nd to 7th Group, 7th Special Forces Group. You go to Q course, become a Green Beret. Mm-hmm. Obviously DLI, Spanish,
but it was in-house. We didn't even go to DLI. Okay. They at SWIC, they had their own 3-month course at a time. Yeah, at that time.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, man. But
was 7th Group at Bragg at that time, or
it was?
Okay, so now it's in Florida.
It's in Florida now.
Which is I went down there and spoke a couple of times to the unit there.
Yeah,
did some resiliency speaking at there, and incredible facility.
Oh, no doubt.
Really, 7th Group is a really cool unit.
Yeah.
Because they get all the socks.
What's the best group? Also, I mean,
yeah. Well, they get all the good Sock South missions.
Well, yeah, and whenever I was pre 9/11, so all my group time was pre 9/11. So at the time, like 3rd Group had just gotten stood up, and they had Africa, so that was always dicey. They didn't have any money, so it wasn't that great. And then so it was either 7th or 1st, either going to Asia or going to Central South America, so I wanted to go Central South America, and so I ended up getting it. But
during the war on drugs.
Yeah, man, it was during all of that, the war on drugs, you know what I mean? And I loved being in group. But back up just a little bit, whenever, because it ties into like later on as big part of my learnings throughout. So even when I was in the 82nd, like I was around these legends. Like there was a lot of Vietnam vets still in.
Right.
Like my platoon sergeant was a Vietnam veteran. You know, my battalion sergeant major, you know, was in Charlie Rangers, you know, in all the Vietnam books, you know, who's my sergeant major. Like that's the kind of, you know, General McChrystal was a battalion commander, you know what I mean, in the brigade that I was in. You know what I mean? So there's like, General Abizade was my brigade commander.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's like, I was in the 82nd, not a spec ops unit, but those were the people that, like my first sergeant, you know, Hamburger Hill guy, like that's who I was surrounded around. You know what I mean? So talk about being shaped, you know, my platoon sergeant, something that he told me that changed my life, military life from that point on. And even now is, you know what I mean? Whenever I got back from, they called it PLDC, to get your E5, you have to go to the basic, you know, NCO course. And came back from that. And he's like, hey, so what does it mean to be an NCO? You know, and it's like, okay, mission and health and welfare of the troops, you know? And he's like, yeah, okay. It's like, well, what does health and welfare of the troops mean? And I was like, well, you know, beans and bullets, and I know how many kids they have, and if they have any, you know, financial problems. And, you know, I started going down the list, and he's like, that's not what it means at all. And I was like, what do you mean? I just read my books.
Yes, the book says,
you know what I mean? Like, that's what it all says. And he said, yeah, you have to do all those things. That's part of it, but that's not what they're talking about. And I was like, okay, because I had no idea what he was talking about at this point. And he said, health and welfare of the troops means you give everyone under your command, you know, the ability to survive and thrive in combat. That's what health and welfare of the troops means. So that's a completely different ball game. You know what I mean? So from that moment on, and having my little bit of experience in the Gulf, you know, at least having a taste of combat, you know, knowing what it was like, and then all these guys, but that like set the tone. Like all those legends is like with the expectations of what it meant to be an NCO were being set.
Yeah.
Whenever I was 22 years old.
Yeah.
You know,
it was a weird time to be in because I went in shortly after you in 93, and ended up, it was a weird time in the recon community because the Rehab, what was called Recon Battalion, it got pushed down to a company at the division level, and then every Marine regiment had was assigned a recon platoon.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a short period in the Marine Corps that did this. And at the time, I remember feeling like I was kind of ripped off a little bit. But looking back now was one of the most significant things because I was at 7th Marines Regiment, and the recon platoon that went there is where I went. That's my first place I served. 7th Marines Regiment, a recon platoon. And the man in charge of that platoon was, at the time, Colonel Mattis, General Mattis.
Right.
And so, you know, a war strategist, a avid, like, consumer of information, like historical, like case studies, like battlefield case studies, and from geography, like, and so he pushed all that down on us because we were his 24-man recon platoon for his 16,000 or 16,000 man regiment. Wow. And so it was a really significant opportunity to be there. And then we had because they hadn't had any recent wars, we had a Vietnam recon Marine oversee, kind of mentor our platoon sergeant. His name he was a gunner in Marine Corps. You have these guys called gunners. It's a rank. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
It's like a gunner is like, so we have chief warrant officers. A gunner is like, he wears that enlisted chevron on one side. It's called like a bursting bomb enlisted. And then a warrant officer chevron on the other side. And these guys are like, they're basically like combat experts, and they're an advisor to the commanders from a battalion level and higher. And so these guys are coming out of, like, they have to come out of infantry, and they go to a year of schooling and learn everything about strategy and ammunition and weapons, and they become just a straight advisor to the commander. And so Gunner Galinas, who's a Vietnam recon Marine and a gunner, was the advisor to. So we had this just tremendous amount of like mentorship over us.
Yeah.
And during this peacetime and a time which is, like I said, I felt like I was ripped off at first, but looking back now, all the guys that came to that platoon, like Mark Terrell and Zach Kane and Philip Thome, like a lot of guys went on to become like very successful like operators in different parts of SOCOM and JSOC and stuff like that. It was a pretty incredible time.
Yeah, because the bar was set by them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, and we received it. And then when I went to group, it was the same way. meaning like 3 guys that were on my team were El Sal vets, you know what I mean, from the war in El Salvador.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You know, so everywhere that I went, you know, and even then whenever I went to the unit, I mean, all of my cadre there was all from Mogadishu. So
Yeah.
I just was super blessed and fortunate of having the men, the warriors around me everywhere that I went. And then whenever I ever got to 7th group, you know what I mean, I was still super young, you know what I mean? I was 26 years old, you know what I mean? And then going to Central and South America, dangerous, you know, and I love being in group, the whole, you know what I mean, that whole mission. I mean, I love
Yeah.
DA and regular missions, but that whole, you know what I mean, building and we actually got to do it. The only thing that we didn't get
It's
to do.
the FID side, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But we built up, like you said, in Colombia,
Yeah.
the counter narcotics, like we built these battalions from rifle marksmanship all the way to company size raid. Right. So, I mean, everything that falls in between of that, you know, in a 4-month rotation, except the only thing we didn't get to do with them was go to combat.
Can you talk about what FID is, like, to the audience? Like,
Yeah, foreign internal defense. It's one of the SF missions. Other units have that mission also,
Right.
but it's basically you're going in, just as an example, we would go into Colombia and take the Colombian military and teach them blocks of instruction. Like for that counter narcotics battalion, it was to take them from marksmanship to a company size raid. You know,
it's a force multiplier, right? Because
That's-
U.S. could send in a small team of Green Berets
yeah.
to empower a local national force as a force
Yeah.
multiplier.
And that's what we were doing, man. And other than the combat piece of it, which was like super unfortunate, you know what I mean, especially in Colombia because they were fighting the FARC and counter narcotic stuff, all that going on. And but we didn't get to do that piece. But up to the combat piece, man, we were doing everything, you know, and I loved it. It was super hard work. I loved to teach. We were having to. That was the thing in group too. Like if you couldn't speak the language, man, you were worthless on the team.
Right.
Like so, you know, me
Especially at 7th group.
exactly.
Yeah.
So if you couldn't speak the language, like you all your stuff was getting ready to be in the hallway. You know what I mean? And so teaching was everything. And I found out that I loved to teach. You know, and I was pretty decent at it too.
I mean, I'm sure you do too. You know, on social media, I get a lot of young men reaching out, and they're, you know, at joining the military age, and they're like, "Hey, I want to be a Navy SEAL. I want to be a recon Marine or a Green Beret, or I just want to be in special operations." And they really hadn't thought what the job was going to be.
Yeah.
And I think to get focused on a branch of service or something they saw, and I really encouraged them that, hey, all these different special operations jobs have their own unique traits.
Yeah.
And if you really look at what each of them do, you can find the right fit for you, because everybody's cut a little different. And I think Army SF, that FID mission is a really cool thing that people don't, they're thinking about, you know, breaching a door and going in and shooting bad guys in the face, but they don't realize like that mission. And that's like something that I think really would appeal to young men to be able to do that.
I do too. And it was, but that's like you said, talking to young go-getters, you know, fire breathers that want to get and do stuff. What I always talk to them about too is, especially young men, is like, okay, that is wonderful. Like if you want to go 18 X-ray and, you know, right into SF, which is super hard to do, or you want to be a Naval SEAL, go right in there, whatever you're, you know, pick your flavor, you know. But this is what I always make sure and ask is like, if you don't make it, would you be happy being an infantryman? You know what I mean? In a regular infantry unit or in the 82nd, not in the special operations. Like, would you be okay with that? Because if the answer is no, well, then you need to really look at like you're just being excited about what you want to do. Because like, hey man, that stuff's really hard. You know what I mean? It's special operations for a reason. Not everybody makes it.
And sometimes not even by your own choice. You might even have what it takes. The circumstances.
Have an injury. You know what I mean? How many guys have you seen just bad luck? You know what I mean? Stuff happens to people. And so that's where I always talk to them is like, hey, would you be okay doing just time as an infantryman?
Or painting a ship.
Right.
Chipping paint on a ship.
So
if
that's,
you go to Bud's and you don't bake it.
Yeah, because I've seen so many guys that get like the dreams crushed, you know what I mean? And now they're just miserable for whatever they've contracted for 3 years or 4 years.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, no matter where I was at in the military, I'm really glad I started conventional, you know, because it gave me like this big gratitude the further up the ladder that I went. And, but you know, I mean, hey, you can make it as badass as you want it to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If even in your own little piece of the pie, you know what I mean? Hey, I've just got a squad and they're my guys, but we're going to be the biggest meat eaters around here, you know? And, I don't know. It's just all perspective and how you look at it.
Yeah, but the recruiters don't tell you, and as they're filling slots, is that you could join the Army with an infantry 11 Bravo contract. You could join the Army to be with a Ranger contract, and you could try out to be Green Beret anytime.
Yeah.
And you know, the Marine Corps now has these recon contracts, but if you don't make it, you're not guaranteed where you're going to be. And the truth is,
the Marine Corps.
80% of the people don't make 80% don't make it. So as great a shape as you're in, there's a lot of things you don't know that you're going to encounter. But if you go in on an infantry contract, at any moment you could try out.
Yeah.
And so, but now you guaranteed something to back in.
Yeah.
So I always encourage.
And it was, you know, I mean, we had a lot of years in the military peacetime. You know what I'm saying? Everybody, I want to go to war. Well, we did too. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There's like that, especially in the branches and the job descriptions that we have. You know what I mean? Hey, if you were going to be in the infantry or any kind of spec ops, that means you obviously want to go to war. But we had 10 years, you know what I mean? Or, you know, 11 years of total peacetime. But I had a amazing, you know, time during the peacetime. Man, it sucked if we weren't at war. You know what I mean? Like, however, look at all the stuff that I did whenever I was in group, all the other schools that I went into, you know what I mean? All those different things.
A lot of experience, built a solid foundation.
Yeah. I mean, I was, you know, I mean, I didn't go out to the unit until I was 31 years old, which is old in the military ages. You know what I mean? I had 11 years in, and I was a senior E7, you know what I mean? Getting ready to not long be a team sergeant, you know, at group. So I just didn't want to, the only reason why I went to selection was I didn't want to regret of not trying.
Yeah.
Never thought I'd make it. I was just like, I'm like, you know what I mean? I just like, hey, I don't want to regret, like, at least not get, I was totally good with like, I'm not going to make it. Not that I mean I didn't go for it, but in my mind, I was like, nah, man, I don't. Yeah. I
mean, it's fair because you don't know no one knows what they're looking for.
I didn't, especially like guys in the Ranger Regiment knew more about the unit. Again, this is all pre 9/11. Like, I went to selection in September of 2001 is whenever I went to selection. So I was already slotted to go, you know what I mean? But, you know, September 11th happened, and by the end of the month, I was at selection.
So for those that don't know what Tom's talking about, and his selection is going to try out for the unit, which is also known as Delta Force. And I know we're not going to be able to interrogate Tom to give us all the secrets here, but it's very the assessments or selection for the unit is very close held. What happens there, what they're looking for at the unit. I have, you know, tons of friends as well. A lot of my mentors in training for the job I did at JSOC was from, you know, old school guys from the unit we were talking about earlier. And then I have some friends now. One of the guys that worked in Mighty Oaks had just recently retired from the unit. Right. But yeah, I mean, so what can you tell us about, I guess first of all, like the process that you could tell us about somebody in the Army having and by the way, not just Army, right? All other branches get to try too.
Other branches can go too.
Trying out, like, what's the process to get the chance to try out for, you know, one of the two premier special mission units in the world?
I tell you, it was the coolest experience I've ever had in the military. Yeah. Like, I would totally recommend that everyone should just go and do it, whether you think you can make it or not, because without a doubt, it's because I was cadre, you know, at selection also, you know, years later. So, you know, the inner workings of it and stuff, but there's no other course where there's no cadre factor in there. Like, there's none. It's you against the clock, and whatever the standard is what you're going against. Like,
you don't know
if I was cadre,
though, right?
If I was cadre and I see guys like this guy's always at the back of the pile, he's like, you know, he's not really pushing hard and stuff. Doesn't compute into whatever the algorithm is, you know. So it's the most professional. I mean, there's been more guys fired from screwing up selection than anything else, you know what I mean, at the unit. I mean, it is because they know that with that job description, that level of responsibility and authority that you will have as an operator, you better get the hiring part right. And so the hiring of an operator is like whenever you go through your boards or whatever's going on, like the unit leadership is interviewing you at the senior levels. You know what I mean? Like it's that important, you know? So it was during that time, you know what I mean? Again, it was super interesting time. I was, and that was 2001. So I already had one son, you know, me and my wife and I got back together, like we said, you know, so I was living all the resilient stuff that you talked about. I'm killing it, man. You know what I mean? Like I was, you know what I mean, on the Christian side of the house, on leading guys to the God side of the house. And I say that for two different steps because for me, it was two different steps. Like whenever I went into AA and they started the God thing, you know, obviously I'd mentioned I had a huge problem. But a lot of that was, I had a lot of anger and stuff, but really underneath that anger was shame and guilt. Like you don't know what I've done, but I know what I've done.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the shame and guilt that I have is like, man, I couldn't even approach the idea of Christ. And I knew all about it. I'd been church long, you know what I mean? I just,
so disqualified yourself.
100%. Right. I couldn't even begin to have the idea that was going to, that was going to work for me. And, so in AA, they have the 12 steps, you know, like it was originally, here's the funny thing. What I love about, when especially when veterans have this resistance to, AA and the 12 steps, if that's what their struggle is, it's like, you know that it was started by a veteran, right? Like a World War I veteran.
I did not know that.
Bill Wilson,
really?
You know, one of the co-founders.
I can't believe I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Bill Wilson and that age group. I mean, we're talking 30s, 39. They were World War I veterans. Like, we're pretty tough.
Yeah.
But we're not World War I tough.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, like the trench warfare. And so that's what always is funny to me. They're like, oh, there's a bunch of BS. That's like, hey, you're a veteran. Veteran started this. I don't know, mate. Yeah. Maybe it'll work for you.
Out of combat.
I'm not a smart guy, but
guys coming out of World War II, they didn't have Polypro or Gore-Tex or anything.
So that approach, man, it was just like God a long time ago had decided like, hey, where he wanted me to work, right? Yeah. For sure. And this backed up biblically, I found out later on, but you know, but the approach to the 12 steps, man, was my entryway and my approach to God, because I just couldn't bridge that gap, you know, between me and all the stuff that was inside of me, and getting a relationship with a God that I understood, because the one that I understood, I didn't want anything to do with. So I needed a new understanding, you know, and that's where I met these people, particularly my sponsor in AA. You have a sponsor, a guy that guides you through the steps, you know, and he had only been sober about a year, and so it wasn't like this guru or anything, but in AA they have a book, right? Every society has a book, right? You know, Christianity has the Bible, you know, Muslims have the Quran, you know what I mean? In AA you have you know, the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, so it's set up as a textbook, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic, division, multiplication, algebra. If you try to open up in algebra, you're not going to understand what's going on. You got to, you know, it's constructed that way. And so
that's the steps.
Right? Yeah. And and it was all about cleaning out the garbage that was inside of me, the resentment, the fears, you know what I mean? The shame, the guilt, the results, you know what I mean? How do I, like if I'm 90% filled up with garbage or unnecessary stuff, if I try to add God to that, I'm only going to get 10%. At best, you know? So it's just, so the process of the steps is you clean out all the garbage, you know? And then whenever I get rid of that which is blocking me from the sunlight of the Spirit just fills the space, you know, there's no voids. And so for the first time in my life, I had a God in my life, you know, which was amazing because I was a hopeless dude.
Because you had the other areas, right? We talk about resiliency and resilient, like we're in a resilient show, right? And we talk about the 4 pillars, like mind. You had a strong mind. You had a really good perspective and mindset. You're healthy now. You're physically fit. You're healthy socially. Like you're starting to build you're surrounding yourself with good mentors and social people. So now you have the spiritual piece. So you're like, have a solid foundation of resiliency.
Absolutely. And for me, it was always, I call it God with skin on it. You know, it was always from another man,
Yeah.
or woman, but a godly, a person that knew their creator and had a relationship with their creator is who brought me to my creator. You know, and that was, that initially for me, it was, so the concepts that I bridged the gap with was Native American concepts, like Great Spirit, you know what I mean? All of those kind of things. I didn't like try to convert to be a Native American, you know what I mean? But it was just the concepts where my own conceptions, however inadequate, got me going in that direction. And my sponsor taught me to pray, you know, hey, in the morning you ask for help. And if you make it through the day, in the evening you say thank you, right? Like that was non-negotiable, whether I meant it or not, irrelevant. We're just going to do the actions, because right actions produce results that I'm looking for. And so anyway, got through all that stuff, but I was like a couple years sober, and I, you know, had a wonderful relationship with God. My family's back together. It was just me and my wife at that time. And I backed up a little bit, but it'll lead into where we're going to 9/11. And so I would read the Bible, you know, I mean, because you're supposed to read the Bible, you know, and so and I was very spiritual and had a relationship with God in my understanding, and I was always seeking more, and that's what, you know, I have to always continue to seek, you know, and enlarge my spiritual life. And so I was doing that, but I was reading the Bible, man, and it was like reading Tom Clancy or something, you know. It was like, okay, that's kind of cool, but like, it's like flat, but I would always pray about it to God. I would be like, man, is this true? I was like, I mean, I've heard it my whole life, you know, it's right here in the book, but I'm not connecting, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying it's not true. I just don't know. I don't have the knowing that other people have. And so I would pray about that a lot. Like, hey, is this true? Like, show me, you know, and man, I would just keep going on. It wasn't like a grudge or anything. And, but I did Best Ranger in 1995. And two guys that were on that team, two young men, same age, early 20s, you know, they were living, breathing, walking, talking Christians, man, unlike any that I had never met before. They talked about their own struggles. They talked about the mistakes they had made. They were not judging. They were you know what I mean? Like they were I know that those people were around me my whole life. I know that. But I wasn't ready for it then, you know, and then, so I met these guys, and then, you know, we're young fire breathers, you know what I mean? Best Ranger competition was what got us together in the 82nd. We're training up for it. Then I was going to all these like underground Bible studies with them, you know, in people's garages, and, you know, groups would get together, and it was a parallel with AA, because that's what I would do with AA meetings. You know, we'd meet up and have our meetings, talk about all the spiritual things. And, but somewhere through that process, you know, of meeting those guys, and then I knew that it was true. You know what I mean? I couldn't tell you the moment and something that was said, but, you know, that prayer that I prayed through all these different actions. I've never had I've only had one visual spiritual experience, you know, and that was much later in life, but it was always an education variety for me. You know what I mean? I always grew into it through other men. You know, so like again, back to what you teach in resiliency, I mean, I was getting it all the way through, and then it got to 9/11 time frame, you know, and I'd like to back it up just a little bit too. I'm excited now.
No,
you're gonna have to rein me in, but it's but there's you know, we talk a lot about Mogadishu, Black Hawk Down, and man, and there's this new, I don't know if you watched the new Netflix on it.
I started watching it. Yeah, I want to finish it.
Oh my God, amazing, man. But anyway, in 1993, I was in the 82nd. I was a year sober. I had all these things going on in my life. And then Somalia, you know, was going down and happened. And then, you know, that day, you know, happened. And I remember reading the newspaper, like on some 82nd ammo guard detail, you know what I mean, out in the woods somewhere, but I had picked up the paper, you know, it's 93 time frame. And I was reading it, you know, you see the bodies and you see them drug around, you know, all that stuff. And then shortly, so I was just like, wow, like in my mind at that time, my belief system about the U.S. Army and my country was that if that happened to me, you know, if that was me in those pictures, that my country would then, you know, make up for that.
Make it right.
Yeah, I mean, would absolutely bring the fury of the United States military on the enemies that caused that to happen. And that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like we left.
Yeah. It was way,
Right. So at that moment, my whole core belief system about the United States of America and the U.S. military, specifically the U.S. Army, was shattered. I almost got out because my belief system was that's what so we just left from that. So then I had to do a lot of soul searching. I had to do well, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because that was a big part of my belief system, but had never been challenged until that. So it got challenged. So obviously I reconciled it. And what I reconciled it with was like, okay, I'm doing my job in the military while I'm in the military because that's what I believe in and what I want to do, irregardless to what my country, presidents,
the government,
the government and I know my men left to the right. Well, I know why we're doing it, and that's good enough for me, right?
Yeah.
That's where it ended for me. But I had to, like the guys that are having a lot of problems with that about pulling out of Iraq and pulling out of Afghanistan and they're questioning their time in service. I answered those questions for myself in 93, so because then it's
and you held on to that through.
I did. Yeah. Because it was my new belief system.
Because that wasn't the last time that happened, right? We've seen that happen over and over and over again over the last.
And it's why I don't struggle with it the way that other guys, just because I'm further, not because I'm better, but because I'm further down the road. Like I made those kind of decisions and reconciled that information in 93. Still stings a little bit, because of battles in Fallujah, battles in Ramadi, you know what I mean? All these different things. It's like, that sucks. But it didn't make me question the reasons why I was in, because I knew why I was in, and it was to the men left and right of me. You know what I mean? That's why I was here.
Yeah, you have a lot of equity in Iraq, and then to watch al-Assad get.
Yeah, I think I have
2011 when you were retired, right?
Yeah,
it's the same time.
I think I've had like 3 birthdays in Iraq. You know what I'm saying? I was like, I turned 21 in Iraq, and 25 in Iraq. I mean, it was crazy. But anyway, so I backed up to that because I just really want to establish like how solid I was. Not meaning me, look at Tom, great dad, but no, man, like everything, the 4 pillars, like, man, I lived that for a decade, you know what I mean? All the way up till, a decade plus before 9/11 happened, and then 9/11 happened. And, like I said, it happened. Obviously we all knew what happened there. I was in 7th group at the time. And then I was going to selection right after that, so it was like, because at the time I had a decision to make, man. If I'd have been in 3rd group or 5th group, I would have never went to selection.
Right, because you'd have been deploying.
Because I've been deploying, but I was in 7th group, and I'm like, because again, for 11 years, I've wanted one thing, and that was to go to war. You know what I mean? I mean, I had the Gulf, but let's say put that aside. For the next 11 years, like I've wanted to go to war. So now war's kicked off. Like who's going first? How can I get there the fastest? And if I stayed in group, like, man, they're going to be the last ones to rotate in. Seven, we're going to keep that mission going on. Eventually we'll get there. Because like I said, I didn't leave SF because I was one of those guys like, oh, screw this. That place sucks. Like, nah, man, I loved being in group. And like I said, I just wanted to give it a shot and not have a regret.
I want to say this, and I'm going to make sure I'm right. So I'll ask you, for those listening, because you go to selection with a tremendous amount of experience. Like I said, 11 years of experience in special. But for those who want to take the walk and go to selection and try out to go to the unit, you don't have to have any kind of background at all.
Man,
right? You can be a cook.
In my class that made it, right? That made it from selection all the way through. These guys, one of them was a non-airborne Stinger guy, shot Stinger missiles. Another guy from the Navy was a Navy hard hat diver, not a SEAL, like a salvage diver. Like dude hadn't shot a pistol like ever. You know what I mean? Like he didn't lead nav like any. You know what I'm saying? Like, so to your point is like, that course is set up to take and teach, anyone from any background what they need to know to pass that course. right? So the skills, to your point, like obviously, if you have a lot of that under your belt, like the Ranger time, the SF time, that's the biggest pools that they pull from.
Right.
But there's still a large percentage of guys that come from conventional Army, that come from the 82nd, that come from, you know what I mean? Like I said, a Navy hard hat diver,
Yeah.
you know?
There's no prerequisite on a resume that you have to have to.
Now, all of those guys had some things in common, right? I mean, they were incredible athletes, you know what I mean? Because selection's super hard. You know what I mean? Like not to be like, yeah, you can,
Physically
anybody
tough,
can
mentally tough.
Mentally, I mean,
solving.
and it's individually selected, man. You know, you know, I mean, you were chosen as an individual. There's not any like, hey, you can kind of get by with the team kind of thing, kind of hide in the crowd. Like you are 100%, you know what I mean? The things that they do when you're there, you know what I mean? You do a lot of land nav. It's all individual decision-making under stress, right? Which that's, anybody can make individual decisions, but not under stress. What do you do? So yeah, I had a lot of experience. So you don't have to happen. Obviously, I had a lot of. I'd already been to Ranger School. I'd already been in the infantry. I'd already went to selection in SF and made it. I was already been in SF. So I mean, I had like the whole crawl, walk, run into the unit. I had fully, because I don't think I would have been. I don't think I was a guy that could have made it. Like I was 5 years in the 82nd with a Ranger tab, and I barely made it through SF selection. You know what I mean? Kind of deal. I wasn't like one of those prodigy, you know, guys that, you know what I mean? They just crushed everything.
Right.
No, I wasn't that guy. I wasn't, I'm the guy that made the guy that win first place work harder than they ever wanted to do. I rarely got first place, but I had a hell of a work ethic, you know? So obviously you have to be in shape, you know what I mean, to go and pass it.
So you get selected and then you go to.
Yeah. So I got selected. Right. And, like I said, I was a senior guy. So I got selected and we went up to New Jersey after that, you know, so went through it, made it through selection, got selected, like won the Super Bowl. Right. Like, like I said, I never thought I would make it, but I went for it. You know what I mean? I didn't have like a self-defeating concept. You know what I mean? Right. But I'm a realist, you know what I mean? I'm one of those guys, you know, some guys are like, burn the ships and everything. I was like, I have contingency plans, man. That doesn't mean I'm not going to give it everything I got and die in place trying to do it with my level of commitment, because that's what I'll do. And I have a pace plan, you know? Yeah. So I went, made it. And then my wife at the time, you know, she was 8 months pregnant. You know, so I got a 2-year-old. Yeah. And, you know what I mean? And then a wife that 8 months pregnant. So we finished up and we went to visit my in-laws up in New Jersey. And we're in this is October timeframe of 2001, right? So ground zero at that time was they didn't know everybody was just gone, right? This is the time when the firemen were sleeping in the churches and all the people's faces were plastered everywhere. Like it was still that time. So we're in New Jersey. And we're like, hey, we can't be this close and not go to ground zero, you know? So my in-laws and, you know, we went up there with my 2-year-old and, you know, my wife pregnant. And so we went there and it was just, you know, I mean, it was still smoking, you know what I mean? It smelled like putting out a campfire, you know, that steamy charcoaly smell. Yeah. That's what the whole place was kind of like. And then we went up on the Empire. So we walked around down in there then we went up on the Empire State Building and, you know, we're just looking at it and stuff. And then my wife got a 2-year-old and, you know, an 8 month, you know, wife's 8 months pregnant. Like I knew what was happening next. Right. Like I have, and again, because I have all of that resiliency, because I have all of that knowledge and wisdom and understanding with the military and with life, like I'm getting ready to change my family's life forever. Right. You know, and so each step along the way, you know, my final prayer with God is always either bless it or crush it, because God doesn't talk to me like, Tom, this is what I want you to do. You know what I mean? That's
close the door, open the door.
Nah, he does. For me, some people, hey, whatever that maybe does, but for me, you know, I've always, you know, gathered all my intel, positives and negatives, military decision-making process, and hey, positives and negatives, what's the best thing to do? And I make a decision and take action. But I don't know if that's what God wants me to do. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think maybe, but my final prayer is always, all right, Lord, either bless it or crush it. Because I'm hard-headed. I'm not going to hear the whispers, man.
Yeah,
and my God knows that. You know what I'm saying? Like he'll break bones in my body. He'll change my mind. He'll change paperwork. I mean, I've seen it all, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that's always my final prayer. So that way I know wherever I'm at in my life, I'm where God wants me to be. That's super important to me, even if I don't understand it. And there's some things that me and him got to talk about whenever I get there. Cause I'm kind of upset about it. I kind of don't really, I mean, I know, but I need to know now because that shit bothered me, you know what I mean? Or whatever it was. And, so then doing that, so it was all these things, man, were heavy decisions, man. Like, I'm like, you know what I'm saying? I know what's getting ready to happen. Or I have an idea, so obviously I made the choices that I did, and I was in alignment with God and with my family. And my wife, man, she's like this Spartan queen. You know what I mean, bro? Like, the whole deal, come back with your shield or on it, kind of deal. She's way more badass than me. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, single mom for many of those years with two little ones, and so that anyway made it to the unit, you know what I mean, through selection, and then
in the training package.
Yeah,
right?
Then I'm into training, and then like I said, is those guys now yet again, me being blessed with like who's teaching me, now I got all the Black Hawk Down dudes, a majority of them, like that's my cadre, you know. Who, if you could pick anybody to be your cadre, you know what I mean? And there, you know what I mean? And that, I mean, selection just gets your foot in the door. Like, hey, yay, great job, you made a selection. But for the next 4 to 6 months, like there's an axe hanging over your head every day. Like
to stay there.
Every day. And like when you're doing CQB and, and in the house, like there's an instructor for each person that's watching you move through the house. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not getting away with nothing. Right. And that's that level of guys. These are the Black Hawk Down dudes, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so it just epic, you know what I mean? But it was super intense. And then my son was born like 2 months into the course, and so my wife had a lot of complications. So it was a super hard time, you know what I mean? But made it through the course, and then made it into the squadrons, and then my next deployment, my first deployment with the unit was in 2002 in Afghanistan. Sober, right? So now
his first deployment, sober-minded.
Yeah, and when I went to the Gulf, I wasn't sober, didn't have God in my life, none of that stuff. Now I'm sober. I have all these tools in the toolbox, man, and all of this stuff. You know what I mean? I'm a machine, man. You know what I mean? I couldn't been even more ready. And that was 10 years, 11 years of preparing for that time, So if there was a guy that was set up for success, you know what I mean? I don't know one that was greater set up for mind, body, spirit, social, everything than me at that time. But I was a little afraid, because I didn't really know, I didn't know how I was going to be. The last time that I had kind of touched that kind of aggression and violence and stuff was whenever I was not sober. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, am I going to be a monster? Am I going to go too far? Am I going to, all these other tendencies? Because I've been a violent dude my whole life. You know what I mean? If there's one thing that's always been in my life, it's been extreme, unpredictable violence, physical violence. And so I was wondering how I was going to be. Like, am I going to go too far? Am I going to do, I'm saying all my prayers, going in on the hit. I mean, I'm not afraid. I mean, like, I'm living the dream, man. Like, this is the Super Bowl with the unit. And I don't know if I don't even remember if I told that story on Sean Ryan. Like, broke my nose, break my nose before the mission even happens.
This is the first mission?
Yeah, first mission, man. Yeah. First mission. It was before we even got going, and it was like this extended, plane ride, extended vehicle ride, extended walk through the mountains thing. You know, I mean, it was intense, and I like totally crushed my nose, blood everywhere.
How'd you break it?
So there was it was a thing that goes in the back of trucks. You know what I mean? It was like a 2x4. So it was just a thing for like we needed as part of the structure in the back of a Jenga truck, you know, the old Jenga trucks. Yeah. And so it was basically a sheet of plywood, you know, with 2x4s to make the plywood stand up.
Right,
you know,
right.
so to like section off the truck.
Yeah.
And so I'm in the back of a pickup truck as we're going to the C-130s to load our stuff up to go and then get in a truck and then drive. And so I'm holding it, you know, I mean, I'm probably the best shape I ever was in my life. I was 32 years old, unbroken, beastly, you know, and I'm like half the man I used to be, you know what I mean? I don't mean that negatively, it's just the truth. And uninjured, you know what I mean? No injuries. And so I'm like holding this thing down in the back of the pickup truck, and we're going out to our C-130 to load up. But there's like a German C, and I don't hold this against the Germans for any reason, but there's a German C-130 type plane there. And as soon as we got behind it and turned sideways with it, he gassed the gears. So, you know what I mean? So the plane starts moving, and all that prop wash hits that sheet of plywood.
Yeah.
And man, and that thing just takes flight. But the 2x4, you know, we got an angled 2x4 here and one at the bottom. You know, the 2x4, the first one, wham, hits me there. And then the second one hits me in the side. Almost it like crushed this side of my nose and pierced the nasal artery there. So there's like blood just squirting everywhere. And then
you've been waiting 12 years for this moment.
Oh, I know, man.
And the moment arrives.
The rest of it is that, you know, I got knocked out for some brief period of time, but I pop up. And I look down, I mean, there's just blood pouring out of, you know, a solid nose break, man.
Oh, yeah, it's really a lot.
And it broke not the cartilage, the bone, you know, this part of my nasal cavity. And I'm like a 6 IC, you know what I mean? Like I'm a seasoned dude, but there, it doesn't matter where you come from and what your rank is. You start at the bottom, you know? So I'm like brand new guy at the Super Bowl. Like there's no way that this just happened, you know? And my 2 IC comes around the corner. And I'm thinking that the blood is just coming out of my nostrils, you know, so I pinch it off, you know, and he walks around the corner and I'm like, I'm good. Because I'm like, I'm going on this mission. You know what I mean? I don't care what. But what I didn't know is my nose, the artery was cut right here and it's just like shooting blood out from the side. And I'm like going, I'm good. He's like, no, you're not. And so then the medic comes up. And then I almost pass out just from the shock, you know what I mean, factor. So I lay down, and whenever I'm laying down with my feet up, I'm conscious and awake. And the whole time I'm thinking, I'm like, there's no way this is happening to me. Like there's just there's no way. Like dude's grabbing my shotgun, another guy's grabbing my charges. And I'm just like, there's no way that they're getting on the bird because, you know, it's happening. And so finally I kind of about a minute later, you know, the shock settles and I'm good. I stand up. I'm like, hey man, I'm good to go. We had this old PA that was with us, gray-haired dude, you know what I mean, been around the unit forever, you know, and he comes up. And the medic was my buddy that I'd gone through the course with and stuff. And he's like, bro, I don't know, man. Because it was like a big endeavor we were getting ready to take on.
Can you say what the mission was? Or
it was a kill capture.
Okay.
That ended up being just a capture mission. And at that time, 02 time frame, so we're still going after, you know, bin Laden and all of that stuff like everybody else
guys,
was. Yeah. Up in the mountains. And so the old guy, PA, he comes and looks at me, you know, just old crotchety dude. He's like, you all right? You know, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm all right. And he's like, okay, go ahead, get on the bird. So then I got on the bird and I'm like grabbing my shotgun back, giving my stuff. I'm all pissed off. Like, you're just going to leave me. And so anyway, went on. That was my first mission. So it was nothing crazy. For me, again, that was my first time in combat. You know what I mean? Like really. And you know, as far as hands on, you know, a little bit of shooting, and the coolest thing in the world for me, man, it was like I can't describe how relieved I was, man, as I was professional. Like, cause I had those fears of, am I going to go too far, be too violent? Am I, you know what I mean? Cause that's what I thought would end up happening just based off my past. And, and it wasn't, man. Like I was super professional.
Was the composure Like
yeah, man.
From the training, from the experience, you just
it was just like we had trained for. Again, we trained so hard for so long, for this. I mean, I was jazzed up, I wasn't like a super cool kid, you know what I mean? Like, I had emotions I had to manage, going in, but it was just like the training, and we trained so hard before it was easier than the training, what was happening. And even though it was real life, and but there was combatants and non-combatants and people grabbing your muzzle, and everything I did was appropriate, violence when violence was needed, no violence when it wasn't needed, and man, that was like a huge relief. It's like, okay, man, I can do this.
Was this a jump?
What's that?
Was it a jump?
No,
okay, because you talked about getting in a bird. I was like,
oh no, it was air land, and then after it was air land, it was like a 6-hour truck drive, and then it was a 2-hour walk in the mountains, man. So one of the greatest leadership decisions I've ever had to make in my life is about 3/4 of the way into it, I kind of started thinking like, maybe I shouldn't have stayed with them, because I'd lost a lot of blood, man. Take this ginormous head, here, and we're walking, but you know how in the steep mountains where everything's terraced off. And there's little villages along the way and little farm fields. Each one of those terraces, it has the where the crap and pee trench goes in, and then the mound. And then, and then there's another drop off for the next little part of the village. And all the guys, we were, covert going in, not waking up the village. And everybody was walking on that mound, and my balance was not really okay because of the headshot, and so I'm like, do I walk on the mound and maybe fall down and compromise the whole mission and my guys, or do I walk in the shed trench, and so it was so I walked in the trench, you know what I mean, so I wouldn't fall off. So it was but yeah, it was but that was my first mission, man. And it was I was living the dream, man. I spent my whole career, I was a super lifer from the beginning, man, you know what I mean, like I was going to do 30 years and all that stuff. So
you did Afghanistan, which the unit did not do Afghanistan as much as a Dev grew,
right?
So you guys more Iraq. Yep. But what would you I guess just in general, the contrast between Afghanistan and Iraq?
The contrast for me, because it's all geographically wherever you're at. For me at that time, it was nothing like a lot of guys experience in Afghanistan. We were on a time-sensitive target force, so we were a reserve force with the helos that just went and hit these time-sensitive targets. So we didn't do a whole lot. We did probably 4 or 5 missions, so we didn't get a whole lot out. So I that was my limited exposure in Afghanistan. So we were in Bagram. As far as at a big base, we're hitting the gym, hitting the chow hall, playing Halo. Going out and doing what I'm saying?
Yeah, like going out doing your thing, come back.
Hitting the range, and going out doing it and come back. So not the only interaction that we had was on target, with guys. So I didn't get the same experience that a lot of guys had, when they were by, with, and through, and extended land missions. And even, once a lot of the guys started going back in 2012 timeframe, I didn't get that experience in Afghanistan, but I did get that experience, that kind of fighting in Iraq, but not in Afghanistan. And, deal with Afghanistan, just the geography, man, relentless, those mountains.
It's brutal.
Yeah, man. The land itself, is something.
And then add the elements of the cold in the winter, and it's a brutal place.
Yeah,
and the Taliban, of course, the combatants know they live there. They're walking around those mountains in dress shoes.
Exactly, man. And they
flip flops and dress shoes.
Because it was a lot of times, what y'all experienced. A lot of guys did in Afghanistan. The Afghanis were. Eventually, a lot of the Iraqis turned into solid soldiers if they didn't get killed. You know what I mean? Bad guys, solid bad guys, worth fighting bad guys. But it was always the foreign fighters,
Yeah.
Those guys that have been fighting for a long, they were like, there's a lot of those guys that were our equivalent. You know what I mean? They got a lot of, some of them more combat time than we had, man. So, when there was real fighting, real fighting, not just a killing, you know what I mean? But, the 3-to-1 ratio that we always love to have. So it's not a challenge, but man, whenever it got to like, hey man, I'm not sure if we're going to make it out of this one, those kind of moments, you know what I mean? That was always with the foreign fighters, man, or Kurds, bad Kurds.
Yeah. So, because with the unit you did 10 deployments to Iraq or so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So what were those capture kill missions as well? Or
Yeah. So the whole rest of the different times that ever I would go, I was also in the recce sniper troop.
Okay.
But we were also used. What was a little bit different than the folks I was attached to or worked with. We were also used as an assault force. So, so that way the commander, would have, multiple assault teams instead of just these snipers, because we all start off as assaulters, you got to have a minimum of 1 year as assaulter before you can go the recce sniper. And some guys just are into that. Some didn't.
Yeah.
And, but I always loved it because I always loved the more responsibility,
I don't know if you could say, if you can, is it public? Which squadron is the equivalent of Black Squadron, the recce sniper squadron?
There's a bunch of stuff on Wikipedia that may or may not be accurate.
Okay. Yeah, you can go to Wikipedia.
But we had that element in-house with us, you know what I mean, in each one. And so we were able to, so the cool thing about that being with the squadron I was with is we got the best of both worlds.
Okay.
Like, so if there was a sniper mission, like First Battle of Fallujah I was a part of, we got that one. And then the rest of the time, if there wasn't like, hey, a really good sniper mission, then we were assaulters. So we were like double dipping, you know what I mean? So we were assaulters whenever, and the guys that weren't snipers couldn't go on the sniper stuff because obviously they weren't snipers. So I loved it. You know what I mean? I loved, like I said, man, I was living the dream, you know what I mean? To be in the premier unit, in the Army, as far as direct action anyway, and, you know what I'm saying, man, I was, you mean, all the missions, all the money, no BS, no details, no nothing like that. You're either in war or training for war, period, end of story. Yeah. Like, yeah, man, loving it with the same kind of caliber of men and women. And, man, it's just, yeah, that was part of the heartbreak of why it was so hard leaving. Yeah. The way that I left was because, like I said, man, the loves in my life, is my family and the United States Army, man. Like, I mean, I was one of those retard lifers, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? I was going to do 30.
You mentioned something that, you said men and women. I have been, unpopularly spoken against, like women in infantry and like in a recon team, but at the premier special mission units, you have women there, and they have like. So I'm not against women in combat. I've been against the integration in jobs that would be prohibitive to the mission. But at some of these special mission units, they have women there that have a really amazing role and are a great asset. Yeah,
'cause that's how I feel whenever it comes to, as far as women in like the infantry, in the combat arms things. Yeah. The thing that it's all specific to the job, like male, female, irrelevant. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like there's a standard for the job,
right?
And it should be one standard for the job.
Yeah,
You know what
obviously, right?
I mean, it happens in every other job. Why would we ever sacrifice a standard for any reason? Even outside. That's how I reconcile a lot of the male-female discussions that people have. Women should do this and men should do that. I mean, I have my own beliefs about it because of my own experiences. Like I'm always gonna, if there's a female around, it's gonna distract me and I'm gonna protect them. That's just how I'm wired.
Most of the guys that would do that job are wired the same way.
Yeah, and I just speak for me, and that's been my experience. You can argue with my opinion, you can't argue with my experience. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because it was my experience. Yeah. And so for me, that it would be a very big distraction in those jobs. However, again, back to the standard. Like the standard for the job is how you get the job, whether you're male or female. You know what I'm saying? If even without getting into the belief systems and all that stuff, right up from the get-go, it's got to be one standard. And I've met females, you know what I mean, that have met the standards. And just currently, this was an absolute new one to me. I met this female, 26 years old, Marine machine gunner for 4 years in the infantry.
Yeah,
at the male standard. You know what I'm saying? Like
Marine Corps did a good job of keeping that standard. In fact,
and that's the proudest thing. She's the thing that she's proud of the most is that the male standard, meaning the standard. There's not a male, female, the standard. She made it, but yeah, I didn't even know that existed. Back to the conversations of that man. And it was pretty amazing for me, you know.
Yeah, they have at these units they have these roles that women can fit into, and they make the unit. I say the unit in general, but the unit much more capable, and they do a great job there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I'd spent all my time there. I loved it. Again, it was we were talking about missions and stuff. So significant things that happened for me was, like I said, at first on that mountain in Afghanistan, my first hit, man, I was so happy. You know, it was professional. You know what I mean? I was just doing my job. Bad guys are doing their job. We're doing our job. You know what I mean? It was like everything was a professional and appropriate. And so I did multiple deployments, and then God would always have me around conventional units at times, and I was like a curse for him. Not really. I just would. But if I was around conventional guys, it was like, hey man, like you're about to get screwed up, because I ended up turning into a medic, because you know the level of trauma medicine that we knew, you know, as operators and train, you know, we did live tissue training. Our level of trauma just on the trauma battlefield side of the house exceeded any regular medic, you know what I mean? Just on the plugging holes and keeping people alive thing. So I did, so there was like 3 mass casualty events that I was a part of, man. And that's what, if there's anything that got me, as far as emotionally, because I was good, man, with everything that I was doing, even when taking human life, you know, because a lot of guys, some guys, you know, have trouble, especially afterwards, you know, reconciling that, you know what I mean, as far as like, hey, taking human lives. For me, and again, I just always give my experiences, is like, hey, man, when I'm on my knees in front of my creator, that's what everything boils down to for me. Like, I'm going to tell my creator what I did. He already knows, you know what I mean? But I'm going to say, hey, you know what I mean? I murdered human beings, you know what I mean? Like, by the definition of had a plan, you know what I mean? And executed it. But here's my reasons why. Here's what, you know what I'm saying? State my case and state my why, and hope that's good enough, you know?
We talked about this before the show. The differentiating factor, I think, and it should be in our hearts, and that's where I think the spiritual resiliency really could be healing for people. Is what was your motivation?
Absolutely.
Behind that, right? Was it malice? Was it vengeance, or was it, you know, doing a job that protects the person to the left and right, protects our national defense, protects people around the world who can't protect themselves? What's my motive behind it? And that's what's in your heart, is, I think.
And yeah, exactly. And that's what guys mostly 100%, you know, my intent in my heart. And it's just like, because most people, when they don't really, it's because I've had so much experience with this population, our population, you know, and when it comes to healing and spirituality and Christianity is that it's like, you know, war is against humanity, you know what I mean? You're talking about, I firmly believe that we weren't made to harm one another. We weren't designed to do that. You know what I mean?
That wasn't part of creation.
No. However, we know that as long as humans been on this planet, there's always been war, and there's always been warriors to fight that. Everybody has their job description. You know what I mean? You're talented. I mean, those are your God-given gifts were in your profession. It wasn't in the NBA. You know what I mean? Or you'd have been in the NBA.
I'm 5'4". That was not in the cards for me.
So same for me. And so it was, it was that whole piece of my intention of why I was doing it, which is why we'll talk about the shift that was not healthy for me at the time. But the big thing post-military is stuff, like you said, is like, it's like a lot of it is not post-traumatic stress. It's what they call moral grief and injury. You know what I mean? Where, hey, not that, you know what I mean? I feel bad about something. It's I am bad about something. You know what I mean? I did this, therefore I am fill in the blank, shame, guilt, remorse.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? That's really, there's some post-traumatic stress. Yeah, there's some hypervigilance. Yeah, there's some physiology going on. Yeah, but most of the stuff that myself included, the guys are reconciling and struggling with and killing themselves about is that I did these things, therefore I am bad and damaged and unsavable, you know, and you've been there, I've been there. Like anybody that's that's helping anybody worthy nowadays has been there themselves.
Typically, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
I
good
mean,
path, yeah.
again, we need the subject matter experts, but especially in our population, there's got to be these warrior elders that are present, and that's us.
Right.
By default, I think, you know what I mean? I was never dubbed to be a warrior elder. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like the one thing that happened to me that I did not plan for was that I lived. That was the one thing I never planned for. I wouldn't have had to have a death wish, but it's statistics, man.
Right.
You know what I mean? You keep going so many times, you're going to end up on the wall, you know?
Yeah.
My buddies are on the wall. Like but I was okay with it. 'Cause again, if this is where my life ended, not that I was looking for it to end by any means, because I have a family and I have plans and dreams and hopes and future. But if it ended, I was totally okay with it because of the mission that I believed in and because of the men that I believed in.
Was there ever a time in all these, obviously you've done you've seen tons of combat. Was there ever a time that you were on a target and you thought, we're not going to make it out of this one?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's been a few of them. A lot of them for me was well, actually, there was a whole bunch of them. You know what I mean?
Where this one specifically?
Well, just a lot of it with me when those feelings came was mortar fire, man.
Yeah,
like that was everything else. I'm kind of have that just enough arrogance that you're not going to kill me. In the history of me, no one's ever killed me. So you're dying, I'm not. So I always had that level of arrogance, and commitment, and with, again, back to me having, my God in my life is like, hey man, I'm not leaving until he calls me home.
Right.
Like I know that I've seen bullets go past me. I've seen people die to the left and right of me. There's no reason why I should be here, other than God still has me here for his purposes,
right.
And, so I didn't really have a lot. The only time I had those feelings of like, man, like this is it, was freaking mortars, you know what I mean? Because there's no defense.
Right. Yeah. You're not in control.
Zero, powerless, and, but that was like that was a breaking point for us. It was 2006. I talked about, this is like a defining story for me. And it's what I know about, healing also. It's like, we have the ability to compartmentalize, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Everybody who's good at our professions, meaning military and law enforcement, and we have this ability to put our emotions in a box and get the job done. Because if your emotions aren't in a box, you're not getting the job done.
That's right.
So again, that's a gift too, I believe, because a lot of us come up hard and we're survivors and learned how to do that at a young age, but unpacking that stuff, you know what I mean? And you can put stuff in boxes, right? Because that's what we do and put to the side. Yeah. But the warehouse is only so big, and everybody's warehouse is different size.
At some point, you got to go back and unpack.
And it starts spilling out. You know what I mean? And they got psychological terms for it: sabotage and high risk behavior and all this kind of stuff. But at some point, the things that are in the boxes that are in the warehouse start spilling out into other parts of your life. And so that's whenever they got to be addressed. But at that time, for me, it was, hey, I was compartmentalized and I was doing everything. And then we were at a meeting. We were at a mission with the 82nd. Just our sniper team was attached to them because they newly got attached to us as one of our attachments, elements, a whole battalion. And we were doing sniper coverage for them. But mainly we were there helping them how to manage assets. Like, because they now have assets because they're attached to JSOC, right. That they've never had before. I mean, these are conventional. These are 82nd dudes. You know what I mean? Yeah. At best, we got our battalion mortars, and maybe we got division artillery or something. You know what I mean? And our fast movers. Now they've got all kinds of ISR. They have fast movers. They have gunships. They have like anything and everything. Like they didn't even know how to manage the frequencies for that many assets.
Those type,
And I don't say any of that negative. I mean, I will still wear one combat patch. That's my 82nd patch. I don't, you know what I mean? How I was raised was you don't forget where you come from, boy, and so anyway, so I'm with the 82nd. So, but now I'm older. This is 2006. So I'm 36 years old. So some of these guys, the 18-year-olds, like, I'm old enough to be their dad, you know, or they're close about it, you know, and I'm super now multiple deployments into it. You know, I've had 2 other mass casualty events that had occurred. And like I was saying, that's the thing that would, that affected me the most was American soldiers' blood on my hands. You know what I mean? And the American soldiers dying and being injured. And like, those were the things that I was not prepared for. Number one, I'm not a medic. You know what I mean? That's not my job description. I mean, I can do a lot of skill set,
right? Yeah.
But I'm not a medic in heart, because you know good medics.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's their jam.
The 18
man.
deltas they're like, that's,
no.
they nerd out on it.
No, man, I'm not wired like that.
Yeah.
And so the overwhelming stuff for me was whenever, like, I'm seeing these guys, and it's where I started questioning the mission a little bit. I don't think I was questioning the mission. I was just a little bit pissed off at Bush, which I had never been mad at for him before. And what I mean by that is like the surge happened, you know, because, you know, I'm a realist. Like, man, this is the Middle East. It's whack-a-mole. You know what I mean? Like, hey, the good thing that we're doing here is we're buying time, right? Because we take out first, second string, third string, you know, we take those guys out, then the next, it's going to take a while. We're just buying time, right? Because bad guy out, bad guy in, right? I mean, so that was a worthy mission, though, still, for me. You know what I mean? It was good. But then during the surge, and then my warehouse was getting full. My boxes were getting full, man. And then on that mission, it was some mortar rounds had come in, man, and it was my 3rd mass casualty event. And so mortar rounds came in. I was standing talking to me and some 82nd guys. We're just BSing, you know, and all kitted up, you know what I mean? Everybody was doing the right thing, and we were under this overhang, and a 82 millimeter mortar round landed like within 20 meters of where we were standing. And the irony is it landed right in between 2 FDC guys, like because the 81 millimeter mortars, battalion mortars, were right at that sniper location. Yeah. And so that went off, and at that one there was I think there was 16 wounded and 2 dead on that day. But during that time we were kind of in an isolated position, and that's whenever when that mortar round hit, that was I've had numerous TBIs, you know, before this moment and after this moment, but that was the one where I can tell you what my life was like from my whole life to September the 1st of 2006 to what my life has been like from September the 2nd to now. You know what I mean? So that significant altering one, but I didn't know it. Everybody that I knew had been blown up. You know what I mean? Like, this is 2006, man. Like,
people get blown up. Yeah.
Everybody had been, so I didn't think anything of it, man. But what happened during that time was the switch that happened during that time was, number one, I had an undiagnosed and untreated traumatic brain injury, right? So mechanically, something was off. My decision making had gotten affected, and then emotionally, man, I was absolutely shattered. Because again, it was in my mind, you know what I mean? Especially in where I worked at the unit, like everybody on the Army side of the house anyway looked at us as like big brother. Like, man, if those guys are around, like, hey, we're okay.
We're good, yeah.
And so everywhere I'm around, so I took that on. I love that. You know what I mean? I want to be my brother's keeper. You know what I mean? I want to, you know.
Instill confidence.
Man, all of that stuff. And every time I was around them, they were just getting their asses handed to them, you know? It was always indirect fire or something that I couldn't have affected. But anyway, I had this, it's not really twisted thinking, but I had this unrealistic expectation that I was going to be able to protect these guys in a war zone, you know? Because, I mean, I'm a believer, you know? And so then when that happened, and it's like, hey, man, for the 3rd time, you know, I failed to protect that which matters most, which in country, my loyalty chain is American soldiers, not my family. You know, so now what do I do when I failed protect that which matters most to me, the humans, you know, where either I'm going to quit, which I'm not going to, obviously didn't quit, or I'm going to double down. And from that moment on, it became very personal. I was still professional.
Let's say we went from this professional, this is job, this is personal now.
To the personal, whereas in my mindset is that if I can't keep them safe by what I've been doing, meaning American soldiers, in country, it's like, well, then the more bad guys they eliminate, then they won't have the opportunity to get them. So that's where the switch happened for me. And then I was in a good way for the mission, right? Was ate up with it. I was doing everything from on the targeting aspect to doing the hit to doing the battlefield interrogation to then setting up another target to doing the hit. To, Even I'd be back at Bragg running target sets just because of the connectivity, that we had as far as helping out the deployed guys. And so I just got into this continuous operational set, man.
Would you say that, so that you're talking about that on an individual level for you, but watching, things progress from your first involvement from 2002 all the way to 2011, would you say that also not on just an individual level became a cultural shift in the unit where multiple people started to feel the culture of the unit started to have that it became personal? It
did. Yeah, because we had lost buddies, by this time. We all had been a part of a lot of combat, real war, real up close, personal, a lot of extreme violence. And again, I just speak for myself. And but so to answer say is like, yeah, it was started opening up. But for myself, what happened is, and what I learned in retrospect, not in then, is that my humanity was being affected, right? Because I believed in the mission, I believed in taking bad guys out and killing bad guys. You know what I mean? And because that bought us time, and it saved Iraqi lives, 100%. If a dump truck bomb goes off and kills 4,000 people and wounds 10,000, if you don't make any more dump truck bombs going off.
Yeah,
do the math. Lives. You're saving lives. Yeah. And so it was a real mission. And but every time, you know what I mean, it was a chip. And I never had a problem killing people that were on the list.
Yeah.
It never bothered me at all. I didn't, like I said, I was very professional about it. Like, hey, intel's right. Hey, you're a bad guy. We're on an even playing field. Hey, there's no refs out here, but we're on the mat. You know what I mean? And no one's stopping it. You're going to win or I'm going to win. And that's how it's going to be. And, but every time, you know what I mean, there's a lot of things that happened, and it's where I really started learning later on about the moral injury, how I learned how to define that, is there was things that like let's say guys that got killed, guys that we killed on a target, you know what I mean, that was part of a dump truck bomb, suicide or bomber network, you know what I mean? The only way to destroy that network is to destroy that network. The guys that brought over the suicide vest, the guys that have the dump truck, you know what I mean? Every piece of it, you break it down and you have to destroy every element of that for it to actually buy you some time, So a lot of times there's these guys that were getting killed or captured that was very far removed from the actual fight, but they were a critical piece of the puzzle. Say like this ancient smuggler route, where for all of time they've been using this route. Now they're just using it for suicide bombers and stuff. And so I understand the difference between a regret, right? If you would ask me, like, Tom, if you could go back and do something different, would you do it differently? Would you not do what you did? If I say yes, then it's a regret.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I understand that, right. I have regrets in my life. But the ones that were really hanging me up is like, hey, Tom, if you could go back and do this differently, would you? And I'll be like, hell no. Yeah. I'd do it 1,000 times more. And for some reason, it bothers me really bad.
But because you wouldn't change it.
Right. Yeah. Right. So it was this loop, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, it's not a regret. I support the decision and the actions taken, but it just bothers me. But that's what I learned about it was a moral injury. I'm not a sociopath or psychopath. You know what I mean? If I was a sociopath, it wouldn't bother me forever, Right. But the thing is I'm a good-hearted, decent human being. And to take another human being's life, you know what I mean, is probably the most extreme thing that you
somebody's son,
you
father,
can do.
brother,
all of that stuff,
And while they're evil, they most of the time
they're human.
They believe that they were doing the
same as us.
Right, they're same as us. They believe they were doing the right thing, right?
But that's how I viewed them, man. Is like this guy is at our target set, right? At our tier set level. Like those guys, to make it to that level, they had to do what I had to do to get to that level. They're the best of the best, man, the most seasoned and everything. And so it was always looking at them as equals.
Yeah.
And so, but then but that's what I learned about, and where I began to reconcile those kind of things is that everybody kept calling it post-traumatic stress, and regret, oh, you shouldn't have. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
What it was is that war in and of itself is awful. You know what I mean? It's like the things that happen in war, like for a human being to make a decision to take another human being's life is not in anything other than war.
Yeah. And you said it earlier, and you said it perfectly, like we were never created to do that.
No.
It's necessary that brave men and women are willing to do the right thing and stand up against evil and extinguish evil by taking human life. But we were never created to do it. And so because we weren't created to do this, there's consequences internally to us.
Yeah. And that's but the cool thing that, and I even got these lessons from the World War II vets, from the Korea War vets, from the Vietnam vets, when I was sober during all these times, because I was around all these different heroes, and different events, and I watched them struggle. I've watched, when I was in the 82nd, the 45th anniversary of D-Day, and I was in St. Mary, Greece, France, with the guys that are like, I landed right over there, broke my leg, I crawled underneath the rubber, and then I fought for like those guys. Like I'm sitting with them at John Steele's pub. You know what I mean? And I'd watch them during the day. You know what I mean? Like they're talking, they're telling stories, everything's good. And then usually the drinks start flowing a little bit, you know what I mean? And then I watch them come apart. I watch them get in the fetal position and just coming undone, man. Like I've done that. So I'm not judging.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And I just learned. And at that time I was 25 years old, you know what I mean? And I'm like, what kept going in my mind is like, this doesn't go away. Like this doesn't go away. And then from every generation, be it the 173rd reunion, in Sacramento, California in 96, you know what I mean? As a 26-year-old young sergeant, those were the heroes on heroes. There's guys with like 4 stars on their jump wings and, and all this stuff, more missing body parts in one room than probably the rest of the planet. And then what's happening with them if they're getting all screwed up and getting sideways and it's like, it doesn't go away. So, I learned that this must be addressed. It must be a mind, body, spirit. Like you added the social piece, and, so there is no just walking away from this,
Right.
So when that happened to me, plus I had a whole bunch of other injuries. So I broke my back in 2003, had back surgery in 2004, re-injured my back in 2007. So I had this accumulation of physical injuries too. So at the end of, so I had almost my 10 years at the unit was all at the team level, man. Like I was busting through doors like that whole time without a break, willingly, happy about it. And so all my time there was just at the team leader level. And then at the end of it, I was, I couldn't wear kit anymore without taking narcotics, like my back and everything like that. And because I was sober, that's not a route that I was going to go down.
Right.
So I had to make a decision, at 19 years in, like either take the devil's money, that's what we called it, that big $150,000 bonus, or, stay in to 25, or get out. And at the time, man, I was super angry. Like, so all my warehouse was full. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of stuff spilling out, man. And again, I was sober, and I was still, walking with Christ. I was still doing all that stuff, but I was unwell. And I had a good buddy of mine, one of my best friends, because that's why we say warriors healing warriors, is we're only going to listen to each other.
Right.
When I'm not in a great place, I'm only listening to someone I respect and trust, which is someone that has experienced what I've experienced. So I had this buddy of my best friend who I've always been honest with him on my struggles and everything, and he's just like, "Hey, Tom, you're screwed up, man." I'm like, everybody I know is like me, you know what I mean? Like, but I'm being a good dad. But at home, things were, again, when I say getting bad, like, I wasn't yelling at my children. I wasn't, but I was way more distant, and me and my wife, it was, we weren't like anywhere near getting a divorce, but it was rough, man. Again, cause I was just combat oriented, cause I've always been, again, because I've been living these values and everything you teach now, my whole, for at that time, from 1992 to 2010.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
almost 2 decades.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I know I'm screwing up. I know I'm disconnected, but I'm on this thing, man, where I can't let my guys down. Like these deployments aren't going to stop.
It's a priority thing, right? Like
It is.
You like this, my family will be here later, but right now this is the most important thing. So I have to be able to focus on this. It's priority.
And I never believed that way, right? I always believed that because my wife and we agreed to my work, we were in conjunction of what, and what I wasn't, she was in agreement. The only thing, my wife only said one thing no when it comes to me in the military, and that was when 7th Group, their SIF was in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
So when I was in 7th Group, up the food chain is where you go to SIF, right. And so it was in Puerto Rico. So I'm like, hey, we're going to go to Puerto Rico. And she's like, yeah, we're not. And I'm like, well, what do you mean we're not? Because she's never said no before, and she's like, yeah, I'm not raising these kids, by myself in a country where I don't speak that language, and I was like, okay, well, if I don't go there, I'm going to unit selection. She's like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. She's like, take the long route.
I'm like, all right, what I mean? So that was the only thing. So again, man, with her, it was crushing me too, because I knew I wasn't the man I was, but I had an undiagnosed, the biggest thing I had going on, and I had a lot going on at that time, was the undiagnosed, untreated TBI. Because I was doing everything that my prayer, my meditation, my working with others, going to meetings, sponsoring guys. My whole toolbox, man, I was just nailing it, and I was still tanking it. It was bad. And I couldn't get myself out of it. And it wasn't an ego thing, right? I'd already shattered that in 92. I ain't afraid to ask for help. You know what I mean? Right. I'll ask for help. But if you look at the 2010 timeframe, especially at the unit, there was no programs. There was the war machine, man, appropriately. You'll never hear me say that they should try to teach us what to do when we get out, because they would screw it up. No, man, you stay good at what you're good, man.
Let other people do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so during that time, I was on my own. Yeah, there wasn't no programs. There was lucky for me, there was a TBI clinic, at Womack, but there wasn't a lot of this stuff was me and my wife. Without her, I would have never, number one, I never would have made it through the career that I've made. I wouldn't have been able to do anything that I've done without my wife. Yeah. She's my person, and so then whenever that was going on, it was me and her again, because the Army wasn't helping, you know what I mean? So anyway, so I ended up getting out. I don't know, where were we in our stories? I just started.
Well, we talking about transitioning out, but before we kind of leave the Delta Force stuff behind and move on, I want to ask this. I don't want to waste the opportunity to have a guy like you here and not ask this question. Because there's something special about, you spending that much time at a command like that with that level of human beings.
Yeah.
In that most, 99.999% of the world and never experience. If you had to pick one thing that's like a common trait amongst that kind of human being, what would it be? What's the one thing that they have in common that make them uniquely special?
The ability to recover from failure.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, whether it's until you can't recover from failure. So up until the point you can't recover from it, that would be, if there's one trait, that to be able to make a horrible mistake, pay the price, and bounce back for it. An example would be just a perfect personal example for me is, when I was in the training course, I fancied myself a pretty badass guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was an SF guy. I was, for 5 years, I was at Ranger Tab. I had all the things and all the badges and I'd been around, and because I only had other SF guys to compare myself to, it was like, hey man, I'm near the top. I'm not the best, but I'm in the best. Right. And in the unit, it can't be really that much faster, that much better, that much stronger. I mean, really. Yeah.
It is.
I come to find out. So here's an example. What we're saying is, we had been working in the shoot house, live fire, probably 3-4 iterations, good solid basics, but still super basic, right? So we're putting charges on doors. We're doing all that stuff. But everybody's still not comfortable. I mean, I was an explosive guy, so I was, you know what I mean? But some guys like aren't comfortable with charges and stuff. And we had this one guy that wasn't, comfortable. He, was going through the procedures of rigging the charge, prepping the charge to put on the door. And he cracked off the firing system, right? And so we're all sitting around watching, this team's getting ready to go in. The other teams are waiting. Instructors are with us. We're just going to rotate through. That's what we have been doing. Yeah, man. And then the boom goes off. Guy's glove goes flying, some fingers flying with it. You know what I mean? Of course, he just has, a significant piece of deck cord go off in his hand.
Yeah.
So you know what that would look like.
Yeah.
And then, so of course, everybody's moving into action. They get in, and then I'm watching the instructors, the Mogadishu guys, right? They're moving quicker, but they're super efficient. They move it in, they stop the bleeding, they put a tourniquet on. The other guy's pulling the Suburban up, They load him up and they take him to the med shed, you know what I mean? Because obviously, we got trauma docs, right there. And I'm watching all that stuff and like, yeah, man, wow. Dude just basically got his hand blown off.
Yeah.
With him, all that stuff went down in about 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Like those level of things happen, good and stable. He's gone. And then they're like, all right, next team to the breach. I'm like,
we're not taking a day off?
No, dude. Like, he just got his hand blown off, man. Like, what do you, like, you know what I'm saying? It was just like, I've always been a hard charger and like, hey, stay in the fight, all going. And it was like, I want to know like how he screwed up. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to blow my head, you know what I mean? Kind of deal. And they're just like, yeah, man, back in. And so that like set the tone, man. And again, the guys that we had, and I mean, the Sergeant Major at the time, was a team leader in Mogadishu. So we also had his level of expertise, you know what I mean? So it was, back to, you said the one trait. And that was whenever they asked me that question, before, because, you always get sent to a board even before you go across the hall, before if you make it, know, and they asked me that question. It's like, hey, what's the biggest thing you've learned? And I was like, hey, how to recover quick. And, cause every time I would make a mistake, you kind of expect some time, some retraining, some like, and it's like, right. You got to do that right now.
Yeah.
Like you got to dump what just happened and then now do it right with no new reps.
Yeah.
Like,
because you already know it, right? You already know the procedure. The procedure's already in place.
It's the normal traits, you know what I mean? As far as, between that, the ability, which goes into problem solving, right? Because the second thing I was going to say, is the common trait is the, there's the obvious physical attributes.
Of course,
you have to be world-class athlete, period, end of story. But problem solving, the ability to solve the problem, but your ability solves the problems enable you to recover quick, know? So, but if there's a common trait, that's that people are just innately problem solvers. Some of them at a team level, everybody's got their different level of expertise at, some all the way up to the top, of just being able to solve problems, whatever the problem is, solve it super fast, with, national consequences in the balance. So we're not talking about at the schoolhouse. We're talking about on the ground, making the decisions right now that's going to be on CNN later tonight, so yeah, but that would be a common trait is, other than the normal ones, like don't quit, that kind of stuff. But I would say the ones that aren't normally mentioned is the problem solving and the ability to recover.
Yeah. I remember I was in when I was in military free fall school. I was in Yuma. We're doing the jumping, and we had a guy. He had a cutaway, but his risers went behind us. It ripped his. We had those Gym Tech helmets. Remember those Gym Tech?
Oh yeah.
He had those Gym Tech helmets.
The gray ones.
Ripped it off. It tore his flesh off his. And when that happened, like everybody, like they shut everything down for a second, and then he came down, and he went up next.
Yeah.
They immediately bumped him right back up and jumped again. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy just cut away. He's like bleeding still. And they put him back, on a plane and had him jump again right away.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was like, wow, that's
And it translated right into
Right.
combat. Like, hey, there's no one's giving, like, combat. There's no timeout. There's no refs. There's no one. You're not getting a break. Like, you're going to make horrible decisions maybe, and you're going to do it again.
yeah,
And then you're going to do it again. And then you're going to do it again. You know what I mean? And then it's not. So, end up watching that translate over into guys getting hurt and killed, medevac coming in. Now we're moving to building 32. You know what I mean? Like, like nothing stops the train.
yeah,
Nothing.
right. You can't.
Nothing. You know what I mean? Like, you would have,
The nation
and
depends
if
on
you lose enough people, you know what I mean, then the people just get backfilled. But the mission is not going to stop because it can't. Not. That's what I loved about being at those super high levels. Is not doing it was not an option.
it. Right.
So it was.
The nation depends on it.
Yeah. So it's that was super cool, man. You know what I mean?
It is. That's why I like. They want to pass
dream.
up being able to ask you that question. I know a lot of people would be real interested in.
Yeah,
that.
because
That's a great answer. By the
I just loved it, man. You know what I mean? And that was part of the reason why I was so angry when I left, because even though I did 21 years, people would be like, well, man, you did 21 years. And you know what I mean? You were at the team level the whole time. You were my whole career. You had avoided no drill sergeant, no recruiter, no instructor time. I was operational the whole time, and so, yeah, man, I was pissed because then when I found out I couldn't wear kit anymore, because of that, well, I was like, if I can't wear kit, then I'm not staying.
Sure.
A bigger man would have stayed and become an instructor, what I mean? And been able to give back, but I wasn't that guy. You know what I mean?
You're certainly giving back. I mean, now with Warrior's Heart, you're.
Oh yeah,
you're
my give back was out at back to duty because my mindset had been, because I'd watched so many guys like from the unit that leave the unit and other military organizations like that and go to other government agencies, And my mindset always was, I'm not leaving this unit until I'm done.
Right.
Because we had so many guys that went to other government agencies and get killed.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, if I'm going to keep doing the job, I'm going to do it with the guys that, not that those guys couldn't do it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But where there's bigger groups of them.
Right.
So when I got out, my whole working days were done, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I was cool with it, man. I'd gotten in all my firefights. I'd gotten, you know what I mean? I was okay.
So what was the transition from going from this, master sergeant with all this experience that now you're angry, you're not content with you're not content. Like you said, you were done with the operationally, but there was some, some anger and stuff inside of you to go to the man who started Warrior's Heart.
Yeah.
Like what's the transition there?
Yeah. So it was the transition for me was super rough. But because I had tools in the toolbox, you know what I mean? I had a support group. I had my creator, you know what I mean? I had a wife. I have a family. You know what I'm saying? Like if there was anybody that was completely set up for success, you know what I mean? It was me. I had everything that you talk about you need in your life. I had it now for 20 something years, you know? And so because of that, I was able to, number one, get diagnosed that like, hey, traumatic brain injury. And it's like a 8-hour test with a clinician, puzzles, you know what I mean? The test results are definitive. If you're trying to cheat it comes up, and all that. So they're definitive, right? So after those tests, it came back that, hey, 50% processing speed and 50% verbal memory. That's all I was working off of. And that was off of an average IQ, which my IQ is higher than that, so it was even more than that. But it explained that I wasn't crazy. It explained that I was injured, because you can't fix crazy,
right?
But you can fix an injury,
which is pretty redemptive, right? You're like
very,
wondering at what's going on inside, and then you have answers.
Because I was losing my mind,
Chad.
I mean, like, because I'd been there before, right? Before I got sober, you know what I mean? I was not figuratively, like literally, I was losing my mind then. So I knew what that was like, and then now. There was a bit like I was even kind of hallucinating at times, all without drugs and alcohol, but I couldn't stop the noise inside my head. I couldn't stop the visions. I couldn't stop the dreams. I couldn't stop. All my tools in the toolbox stopped working, so whenever I got that diagnosis, it was like, because even with my wife, like, she's not going to suffer an asshole. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So,
everybody has a
'cause
threshold.
she was kind of getting tired of me,
Yeah.
and I knew I was being a jerk, you know, but I couldn't stop. Like, and how I would look at it. A lot of times she would say like, "Stop looking at me like that," because it was just all this fury that I had that used to have an outlet for, which was combat, you know, and it was perfect. Now that was gone. Now I just had this fury with no outlet, you know. So even the look at, I'll show you a picture afterwards of what that guy looked like. But it was you know what I mean? But then whenever, even for my wife, you know, getting the diagnosis, she was like, "Oh, I can do that. I can do an injury. I don't do jerks."
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because she's a strong, amazing human being, you know. And so when we found out it was injury, it's very redemptive, very like, okay. So then it was just like, what cognitive therapy can I get? What, you know, it was just like all of that. So that, once I got my brain a little bit tuned up, things became a little bit easier for me. But I mean, I even was on, like I got on Zoloft for a little while because I had a chemical imbalance. But I'm gonna make this T-shirt, I think, and it says, it's like, just because I'm well trained doesn't mean I'm well. You know what I'm saying? It's because and that really comes down to it. It's like, I know I'm a professional, man. Like, I have been trained in every kind of environment. Like, I know how to act and when not, you know, and to do this. But it's like, but that doesn't mean I'm fully well. You know, I'm still struggling. You know what I mean? I mean, it's not fake. You know what I mean? All this well time. I'm not pretending. I'm not putting on a show or anything. But I am professional. I am gonna always be the man for my family. You know what I mean? God expects me to do that in my belief system, you know, and I am going to lead when it's time for me to lead, you know, and being a leader means you put your own stuff to the side until you have time to address it, you know, and which that's where Christianity and the Bible and all the other spiritual books and all the other teachings for resilience. It's, you know, it's real, it's worked, and it's very warrior worthy.
Yes.
You know, there's this 5-tour Vietnam veteran, and he was also a Korean War veteran, and we got sober at the same time, right? Obviously, ginormous difference. And he's in his 60s, I'm in my 20s, and whenever that man was telling me that it was hard, he's like, getting sober was hard. I was like, wow. You know what I'm saying? Because I used military experience about what was hard in life. You know what I mean? So that let me know that if this dude's saying that it's hard, like,
it's going to be a tough
when
battle.
I know that then it gave me permission to know that, like, hey, if it's hard, it's okay, man. Like, as long as I'm in the fight is what matters. It doesn't matter if I'm the lowest guy in there, you know, like struggling the most, you know, but I don't know, you know what I mean? It matters, you know, just keep going.
Yeah. Starting Warrior's Heart.
Yeah. So it was a super long story. I'll try to minimize it down. So I got the cognitive therapy. I got, you know, and I continued to learn and grow and learn about moral grief and injury and treatment of that. I got really into veteran suicide. Me and Magnus Johnson started up what we called Elder Heart at the time, which is using art and warrior elders to bring the community together, you know, because nobody talks smack about art, you know what I mean? It's like, everybody's like, some people like it, they don't, but it's art, you know, and we did that, and that became Mission 22.
Unless it's Hunter Biden's paintings.
Yeah. And then it became Mission 22, which is still up and going and doing great things. Then, but during that time, we made Mission 22 is when I broke off and started doing Warrior's Heart stuff. And Magnus and his family is still doing wonderful things with Mission 22. But I was in that space, you know, and I was in the nonprofit space. And then, and I've always been helping our population with chemical dependencies. That's like my jam. You know what I mean? It's
like you said that earlier before the show, you're on your Iridium calling for
man,
a sponsor, like on your AA guys.
It's my vehicle, man, that has taken me, you know, the steps, AA, the fellowship. Now we have Warriors Anonymous, which is another thing we got started. You know what I mean? That's my vehicle that got me away from self-medication, that got me into TBI treatment, that got me into my Christianity. Like, that's the vehicle that I've been on through life that has gotten me anywhere I need to go, to include my Christianity. And so it was, where were we? I'm lost now.
Oh, we're just talking about, like, I mean, that journey and you know, you're talking about like helping other people, but I think like when like you said, the most impactful people will help others, those who have shared like experiences on a peer level. But one of the things it does is it's helpful for you because it brings personal accountability.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if I'm going to lead others in this way, then I need to hold the line. I need to be the example. I need to be able to hold that standard myself.
And what I always 100%, and what I noticed when I was doing all the veteran suicide piece and learning all the things, a lot about ancient warrior cultures is one of the biggest two things that we're missing. Number one was warrior elders, because our would-be elders are the most screwed up.
Yeah.
Right. Except for the ones of us that have somehow made it out. Well, we know how, God. And the other piece that was missing was the relentless love and support of the community that the warrior went and fought for. Right.
Yeah.
So that was the divide between the community and the combat veteran. Number one, only 1% serves. So, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a math problem there that's hard to get away from, and then everything else. But without a warrior cannot heal without the community in which he fought for.
In cultures have done this historically forever, but America hasn't really done that well.
Yeah. So I learned about those things, right? And where it's coming is where I met my partner, Josh Landon, for Warrior's Heart. So at the time, it was 2013. I had started up a tactical company. I was just paying the bills, man. I was living off the resume, teacher pistol, carbine, CQB, sniper, the normal stuff. I was paying the bills.
You either go to ground branch or you start teaching, right?
Yeah, that one or the other. And I chose the other way. And so I was doing that, but I started doing these fun and guns got involved with the YPO network, Young Presidents Organization.
I do a lot of speaking for them.
Yeah, so you understand their whole thing,
people,
right? And so we got in their classes available, and so it was this 3-day course. It was super hard. It was, I think we called it, you're going to love this, USASOL, U.S. Army Special Operations Leadership Experience.
Oh,
dun, dun, dun.
That's a big acronym.
I mean? So it was,
trying to introduce them to the acronyms,
right? Because you have the civilian guys that didn't have that experience, they want that experience, and so it was an incredible course with a bunch of heroes doing it, that were cadre, they were the deal. And so it was super proud of it. And so we had this one guy, his name's Josh Landon, that was part of the course. And it was a really hard course, to include getting rolled up and interrogated and the whole deal.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the funniest part was whenever we made him, because we didn't give him a briefing on it, other than you'll be shooting CQB, blah, 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 all these different things, because for CEOs, they're used to knowing what's going on and everything. And that was part of it. It's like, unknown time, unknown distance, unknown mission, all that. And but when we made him sign punch and slap waivers, that was a fun one. And they signed them. It was like, man, they did it. But you seen whenever we were all stone faced when they were doing it,
Yeah.
And they all get to that part of the disclaimers and everything, and you see them like start looking around at each other. And I was like, but they all did it. They all signed it. And so that's where I met Josh, right? But what got him to wanting to know about me and me wanting to know more about him, because, man, I was still 2013, I was still really rough around the edges. I was really only fit to be around cops and on the range and in the shoot house. I mean, my family and I were good, but I still needed that in my life. Not the operational stuff, just be around media, be around folks where I was still providing, I was still fulfilling my warrior role, like old warriors that don't die, you teach. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I was teaching. And but what we also did was what we called at the time a veterans experience, and now we call it a warriors experience, is we take those guys into the woods in the dark and with the ROE established, and we would tell them a story, right? And it's the stories that we don't even talk about amongst ourselves, those stories, right? And what it felt like and what I was thinking and what I was struggling, right? So it was super, super emotional. And because I had learned that that's what brings the community together, right? Because the community has to take their weight from us, right? But what's the venue for doing that? What is it? And well, it's this. They used to do it around a campfire, right?
Right.
Back in the day, their history, everything was taught by the campfire. Even if you just look at, say, Native American history as an example, they taught about their great victories, right? Who told those stories? The warriors told those stories. They talked about the great tragedies. Who told those stories? The warriors told those stories, right? To who? Not other warriors.
The community.
The community, right? So what do you hear from most veterans? Civilians, they don't understand. It's like, yeah, why don't they understand? Because you just hang around veterans. Because you're like, whose job is it to reach across the aisle and talk to the community? That's where I get really tough on veterans. Because they just all want to hang out with veterans and talk about veteran stuff and be funny and stories and stuff. And it's like, no, man, like we should do that. That's cool. You know what I mean? And we all love each other, and and we're trying to grow together, and we need that. But then the other thing that we need to deal is to fulfill our responsibilities in our community, which was with civilians.
Yeah. That's to say, you're not going to integrate into a community you're not willing to be a part of.
Yeah.
And,
so when
if you hang on in that identity, it's not.
They're not going to make
They're
it.
going to make it. Yeah.
And we used to, so at that experience, you've got everything in there. You've got the community members that haven't experienced combats and warriors that have. And you tell one of those kind of stories, right? In a much longer discussion, but they leave just the way that we're forever changed by experiencing combat. They're forever changed for hearing a story about real combat, meaning what happened on the inside. I felt this way. I felt, you know what I mean, like a coward. You know what I mean? All of those things. And it proofs out, so therefore some of my burden gets put onto them and they can handle it, and so Josh, whenever that happened, so we would do that, and it's not a Q&A. It's just like, hey, we're going to accept this story, whether it takes 5 minutes or 5 hours, we're just going to be here, and there's ROE established, and then afterwards we're hanging around by the fire, and we don't talk about the story, but we start talking, and I started talking. This is 13, so I'm still... Start talking about, hey, veteran suicide. At the time, it was 22 a day. Most of those guys, people didn't know it back then. And I was like, now you understand. I was like, you guys, you're all civilians. You're all business owners. You're all very rich. You made a lot of money. And the way that you had the ability to do that was because of the warriors that go and fight and protect. And they were the same belief system, right? So, but then I said, but now you understand the cost. Like you've just heard it from one of your instructors, and you just heard about it, with the 22 a day, and then I said, what are you going to do about it? Right. And for Josh, it was like a spear went right through his soul, you know what I mean? Because, and I said it a little bit too angry, I still had a little bit of anger in there. It's like, I said, like, what the F are you going to do about it? And, but for Josh, he was like, and a bunch of other reasons that were going on in his life, but it was, the short version of that's how we got together. And then it was kind of like stepbrothers. Like, he's like, hey, I want to run rehab. I run rehabs and I want to make my next one for veterans. You want to do that? And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like, you want to do karate in the garage? It's like, yeah, and
did we just become best friends?
Exactly. Yeah. And so we did that in 13. Different things happened. He had to sell his own place. We had to find the property. We found the property for Warriors Heart in 15. And then we were open and licensed in April of 16 is how we found and got to Warriors Heart.
And you guys do active duty military, veterans, first responders.
Yep, in-house right now. There's 64 warriors in Texas and there's 22 in Virginia. And it is everything you just said from active duty. We've got everything from active duty spec ops guys that hadn't gotten in trouble yet, right? So they haven't really hit a super low bottom externally, all the way to homeless veterans. And when I say homeless, meaning on the streets for years, not just that one time. Setting in-house right now.
Who do you coordinate with and liaison with to get active duty service members to come to you for 45 days?
So it depends on the post. Okay. That's the struggle with active duty. It
it's
depends
unit dependent, right?
It's on the post. Like so for active duty, like Camp Lejeune, like the Marines, we got a pipeline. You know what I mean? Like active duty, they go to their SUDC program or their substance use program. The base supports it. They come straight to Warriors Heart, TRICARE. Boom, boom. If you're at Fort Bragg, I'll call it that again.
Yeah.
Or in Colorado, they send to military treatment facilities only, so there's different ways that we also manage that. But for active duty, they just go through their their normal programming, you know, I mean, if they need inpatient treatment, you know, then they come to Warrior's Heart. And a lot of that, like I said, a lot of that is dependent on the post command.
Is there, I know you guys take insurance. So is
Yep.
there any cost to the warrior? If this is like a veteran out listening right now, is there a cost to the warrior to be able to go?
Yeah. So if it's, they go through the VA, there's no cost, because the VA's big thing is no cost. If they come through TRICARE, like I have TRICARE, you have TRICARE, is that, like, hey, there's your copay. But for some folks that, but we also have a, so it's always a hybrid. It's usually there's some sort of self-pay to it, whether that's $5, because it's something that we've learned, like, to have some skin in the game.
Yeah.
But relative to where you're coming from, but it's usually there's a portion of private pay, there's a portion of insurance pay, and there's a portions of scholarship fund.
Okay. And that's Warriors Heart has some scholarship.
What's that?
Well,
Gary Sinise offers scholarships, the Avalon Network, Semper Fi Fund. There's a bunch of different organizations that'll give the warrior a portion of a scholarship to come to the fund, to come to training.
Yeah. I guess what ultimately I'm getting at is there's not many obstacles for those who need help. To be able to get it.
Absolutely. For some people that have absolutely nothing dependent, sometimes that's even a quicker door, because God's got a door open for him for some reason, you know, his reasons. And then for some folks, it takes, you know, a couple weeks to get it. But each one of those cases inevitably is exactly the way that God needs it to be, even they don't know it at the time.
So I guess two real important questions. One, if someone is in need of that care, where would they go to begin the process to start getting it? And then two, for those who want to support financially or otherwise, Warriors Heart, where would they go?
Yeah, so they go to warriorsheart.com. We'll get you to Warriors Heart, and then there'll be a phone number on there. The 800 number changes. But if you call that 800 number, and we have a chat feature and email feature, that the best way is to, there's a phone number on there to give that call. And that's for family members. That's if you just have questions, who you'll contact is what we call an admissions advocate. So, meaning that they immediately start advocating for the individual that's on the other side of the phone. Right. If they have a chemical dependency and they fit our level of care, of course, we want them to come to Warriors Heart. If for some reason they can't, they will help them find care wherever they need, or any family member to make that call too. Or if you're just asking for a friend, you know how some guys are, you can call and just, whether it's prices on how much does it cost, whether it's what's the treatment like, any questions that you have about Warriors Heart, or if it comes to substance abuse or anything like that. That's how you get in charge with Warriors Heart. And then those advocates will lead you through the whole process. So that's on as far as like family members, guys in need, gals in need, that aspect. The other unit, I was going to call it, the other organization that's closely aligned with us is Frontline Healing Foundation. They provide scholarships to warriors in need that need to pay for treatment. And it's not just at Warriors Heart, but there's very few organizations that have set aside to pay for chemical dependency treatment. Very few. And then Frontline Healing Foundation is one of those. That's if you wanted to help, because we're a licensed facility, that we have a lot of restriction when it comes to volunteers. You know, because a lot of places we would love to be able to have a bunch of volunteers come and help, because it would cut down on costs. But because of our licensing, there's a lot of times we can't. So so a lot of the volunteering that we come is, number one, just getting the word out. And number two, if that people wanted to financially assist, you know, I mean, pick an organization, a veteran organization that you love. If it's for, you know, chemical dependency, great. If it's for Christian backgrounds, you know, I mean, whatever your thing is that you love, get involved in that. You know?
And I'm not just advocating for this, guys, because Tom's on here. This is already ongoing. This isn't what area that Mighty Oaks does. In fact, when people reach out to us from Mighty Oaks, if they're like, addicted or something like that, we like, first you need to get in the detox, and you come to Mighty Oaks for a week, and then let's get you into a sustainable like program, like a, you know, inpatient program. And so we had already begin the process of trying to align Mighty Oaks with Warriors Heart. And so it's a program that I definitely believe in. You guys do an amazing job.
Thank you. Yeah. And it works both ways, because then once they get cleaned up, trained up, stabilized, then they can enjoy everything, you know what I mean, to the maximum
Right.
of benefit, everything that Mighty Oaks and all the other places have to offer. But if I'm not, it's back to what's going to kill us first, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're on this objective.
Yeah.
There's like 1,000 things that's going to kill us. What are we concerned about? Well, what's right in front of us? And if you're struggling with chemical dependencies or self-medication, like, man, you can go sit with the Dalai Lama, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can go to all this treatment and it's not going to help you any, because that's not the issue. The issue is so once you handle that one up front, because this is like a lot of my buddies that would just benefit so greatly from the TBI treatment, from any other kind of treatment. You got to be sober.
Got to be sober first. That's what we say.
And that
Mighty
cuts
Oaks,
out 50% of them.
You can't get the most you get out of Mighty Oaks if you're not sober. So let's get you sober first. Let's get you detox first of all, and get you in a place to where you can actually implement the tools that we have. So I love partnering. I've always been that way. We're a lot of nonprofit organizations, especially veteran service organizations, are super competitive and territorial. It's ridiculous. We all have one common goal. It's to help people. If you're not in it for that, you're in it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, but it is. I love it. Like we were talking about earlier, it's super definitive. Like my little space that we hold is inpatient chemical dependency with dual diagnosis. You know what I mean? Of the other stuff. That's it. You know what I mean? It's like that's our subject matter expertise. Don't try to come out of it. I can dabble in this and that, you know what I mean? But no, man, this is the bread and butter. This is what we're best in the world at. And it's what we're, you know what I mean? So back into owning spaces. I'm the same way, because that's what I learned a lot about the nonprofit. The nonprofit is really big profit for folks that aren't doing the right thing.
Unfortunately, it is. Yeah.
And there's like market share and everything. It was, but thank God there's good organizations that are doing it right, because there are some out there, but man, there's a lot that's not. I mean, they are not doing the right thing.
Unfortunately, the government organization that's doing it. We're seeing all that come out now, but
hopefully we'll have a big change now.
We're going to see a big change. And I was on the phone this morning right before we met up, and there's a lot of people in Washington D.C. that's many volunteering for the new administration to help just get rid of the corruption, get rid of all the bureaucracy and red tape, and just focus on making programs that help veterans get well, that work, and just pulling out the red tape, and let's lock arms, make it happen. And what I love right now is the people in this new administration are looking to the nonprofits, looking to the VSOs to say, hey, the government is not going to do this as the government can spend way more money and be less efficient, less effective. Let's lean on organizations like Mighty Oaks, Warriors Heart, and Semper Fi Fund. Like, these great organizations that are out there doing great work.
Yeah, because it takes just like what we're doing. When you talk, this is what the experts, the subject matter experts, will say is in their respective individual siloed fields is like, hey, TBI, very complex. TBI with post-traumatic stress and moral grief and injury, even more complex. Now TBI with moral grief and injury and substance abuse, that's very complex. That's right. That's what we call Tuesday afternoon at Warriors Heart. That's what we call Friday night at Warriors Heart. Like those things are very, in and of themselves, are very hard to handle, but we do that every day. Right. Like with the subject matter experts, but back to the warrior oversight and back to the peer network, back to like there's a way that warriors heal. You know what I mean? It's not because we're special. It's because we're how designed. We're not victims. We're volunteers, right? So even though we may have to be dealing with the same thing, someone who, got assaulted and is a victim. And even though the same thing happened to me, like it's the approach to healing is much different. If you come to me as like, I'm a victim, that's not going to work. Right. But it will work for this person that is like, hey, I volunteered to put myself in those positions to receive that trauma. I still have to receive the trauma treatment, but the approach that you're coming at me can only come from, who runs Mighty Oaks? You know what I mean? I know you got a lot of good people that run it, but who's at the head? You know what I mean? Like there's a warrior.
There is.
And thank God it's you, but I know how, not being arrogant by that way. It's like, it takes a warrior elder, like to not make it too much church like too much this
Right.
or too much that. It's like, yeah,
it's got to be on a peer. For us, it's on a peer level.
it has to be.
Yeah. But man, I thank you so much for what you're doing. And coming on the show today to share your story. We have an amazing group of sponsors that make this show possible, and so we always have gifts. I think of all the shows out there, there's a lot of great shows. I think the Resilient Show gives the best gifts, and it's because of our sponsors. So we're drinking some holy water here by our friends. But so by the way, this can of holy water, the guy who came up with it, he was trying to be in opposition to liquid death.
Mm-hmm.
And but so he started this company and gives proceeds to Christian organizations.
Wow.
So I'll make sure maybe we can send some holy water down to Warrior's Heart. BioPro. I'm not sure if you've ever tried BioPro, but it's an all natural human growth hormone.
I have not.
Supplement. Sleep, man, it's like I talk about. My sleep went from like 4 hours to 9 hours, like off this. So we'll get BioPro's Dustin Baker, who just came on the show, by the way. He's make sure you have a supply of this and check it out if you like it. Bio Accelerator Stem Cell Company. In fact, that's where I went down in Colombia.
I remember on your show.
Yeah, it was amazing for me with the headaches from the TBI, and it like.
I'm definitely going to be asking you more about that.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about it, and if you want to get connected with the CEO Eric Scoffers down there for yourself or for any of your guys that have, especially TBI, a lot of your body, your back, like I mean. The stem cell therapy they do down in Medellin, Colombia, it's incredible. So yeah, Allied Wealth Management for financial advice, and then the ones you probably care about most: Smith & Wesson Firearms, Vortex Optics, Gators Eyewear, kind of our premier sponsors here, and so Smith & Wesson just released this. It's the CSX E Series, and it's I mean Smith & Wesson has done a really good job of starting to put high capacity capabilities behind their handguns. So this one's a super small concealable gun, but has 17+1, so 18 rounds in a concealable carry. It does have a hammer, but it's all single action. It has an external hammer, it's all single action. I'm not big on safeties on guns, but it does have a safety on it. I guess for concealed, a lot of people prefer to have a safety. And I have the Vortex CCW on it. So we want to give you a gun from Smith & Wesson with a Vortex optic, and this is their newest, latest, and greatest. So here you go.
Man, thank you. I appreciate it.
And you're pretty familiar with Vortex optics?
I am.
So man, I don't talk about this always on the show, but I'm such a huge fan of Vortex.
But I haven't shot a lot of their smaller optics though. But all their rifle scopes and razors. I mean, that's my go-to,
razors are
man.
the best.
Unfortunately, I already bought one, but I didn't know that you were one of the things. But dang it. But no, man, I'm in full support. I mean, especially that. I support a lot of different scopes, but that 1 to 10, man, that razor.
You're talking about the razor 1 to 10, right? It's got the.
Well, because I have so much experience. It was with a Schmidt and Bender one, but like in 2003 is whenever I started the low-powered, very optical thing for me, because I had a Shorty 308 and with a 1.1 to 4 Schmidt and Bender on it, with it had short dot with a red dot. So I've been accustomed to that setup for a long time, and that 1 to 10, I literally just bought one.
It's got that quick lever on the top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually just put that one on my my 1854 lever action.
Oh.
Smith & Wesson has this lever action.
I've seen that.
It's called a Stealth 16. Yeah, well, it's got 44, 45, and 357 options.
Okay.
I think it's 9+1 or 8+1, and it's got this lever action, a 16-inch barrel. You could it has all the rails and M-lock on it, so it's super cool. But I put that 1x10 razor on it. It's pretty cool. And then last thing, Gators Eyewear. I'm sure you're very familiar with Gators, because I think you're
they've supported a long time.
Yes, I would imagine. Yeah, but man, I'm thankful for you being on the show. All our sponsors are, and anything we could ever do for you, especially working together at Warrior's Heart. I look forward to it.
Thanks, Chad, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it on the show, man.
Absolutely, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Hey guys, if you have not yet done so, like, subscribe, share, throw a comment. If you got a question for Tom, throw a question for Tom on there, but especially anything about Warrior's Heart. We'll have all the links to Warrior's Heart down in the show notes. And if you have not yet done so, go over our Patreon. We'd love you to join the Patreon for extra content. We're gonna be producing so much extra content on firearms, on survival gear, and some classes, on some little tips on survival stuff. We had some stuff with Uncharted. If you hadn't seen the new 72-hour bag, then check out our store and get the 72-hour bag from Uncharted. It's absolutely incredible. I bought several for myself, and I'm starting to get them. That's like my new giveaway gift for everyone because I just love this bag so much. It's amazing. So till next week, stay resilient. Hey, what's up, Resilient family? I am so grateful for each of you who tune in every week to hear our episodes. We have such incredible guests and topics that I am passionate about, our team's passionate about, and we could not do it without you. So we're thankful for you. We love you. We appreciate you locking arms with us to be more informed, to become a more resilient community. And I want to invite you to become a tighter part of that community by joining us on Patreon. If you go to our show notes below, you can click the link and get dialed into our Patreon and get extra content weekly. You can join for $15 a month and get behind-the-scenes footage, get closer access to me. I have monthly Zooms that I'll be doing with some members of the community. And so we'd love to get more involved. Again, go below in the show notes and click the link and join today.